Hello and welcome back to Wickedly Bookish, where we talk about any and all things book related. I'm your host Wickedly, and today we're going to be doing a special video talking about The Way of Kings. So this one was the second winner of the poll that I posted on my YouTube channel, and so I'm doing this one next. It might take a while to come out, because this one is going to be long, guys, like really long. So before we get started, grab whatever drink makes you happy, grab a blanket, and light your candles, because it's time to settle in. Today's video, like I said, is going to be very special. It's going to be Overexplaining The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So I am going to basically, this is why I made my YouTube channel, is so that I can talk as long as I want about my favorite books and nobody is going to stop me in the middle. You might click off of the video, but I'm going to keep talking. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give some explanations of people, concepts, and places that are going to be important while I am explaining the story. So go ahead and take out your notebooks because you're probably going to want to take some notes. But yeah, so let's start with important characters. First one is Seth Sunsun Villano. Now, Seth is a different race than most of the main characters in this book. He is something called Shin, which is basically a white person, like a regular human white person. That's kind of what he looks like. He's from a land called Shinovar, and so he looks kind of different from the main characters of the book. But he is an assassin, technically, because he is truthless. This basically means that he told a lie when he lived in Shinovar, and because he lied, he is now bound by honor to a rock called an Oathstone, and he has to do whatever the owner of the Oathstone says, so long as it's not to kill himself. He cannot end his suffering. He is not magically bound to this stone, he's just bound by honor. Like, in order to regain his honor from lying, he has to do whatever the owner of the stone says. He also has a special blade that gives him magical powers, and I will explain it a little more in depth once we get to that part. So Seth is an assassin, and that's basically all you need to know for right now. I do have pages and pages of notes, so don't worry, we're gonna get through it all. Next important character is Gavilar. Gavilar is the name of the former king of Alethkar. So Alethkar is the nation that most of the book is set in, and the Alethi are the main characters for the most part as well. So King Gavilar was assassinated by Seth 6 years in the past as of the beginning of the book. Then there is Navani, who is Gavilar's wife. When Gavilar died, she was also in love with his brother, Dalinar, who's one of the main characters. So now that he's dead, Navani is kind of trying to seduce Dalinar, although he's in love with her too, so it's not really seduction, they're just kind of in love. Yeah, and then there's Elhokar and Jasnah, who are Navani and Gavilar's children. There are the prince and princess. Elhokar is now the king as of the present of the book, and Jasnah is a renowned scholar and known heretic. So she doesn't believe in the religion that everybody else believes in. Then there is the King's Wit, also known as just Wit. He is a very enigmatic character, and you find out a lot more about him as the series goes on. But you can kind of tell that he's not quite what he seems. He knows more than he lets on. But his job is to serve Elhokar, the new king, as like a court jester, so he insults everybody so that the king doesn't have to insult them. Then there is Adolin and Renarin, and Adolin and Renarin are both Dalinar's sons. Dalinar is one of the main characters. I'll explain his character a little bit later. Adolin is kind of like a jock, but he also loves fashion. And I really like his arc because, you know, he's struggling with reconciling his father's version of honor versus the culture's version of honor versus what his version of honor is. So his journey is really interesting, and we get more in depth into his perspective as the series goes on as well. Then Renarin is the younger brother, and he has, I believe it's epilepsy. So he is not a fighter at all. Adolin is a master duelist. Renarin is not. His father thinks he should become a monk, kind of. They're called ardents in this book, so that he could do scholarly things, because men in this world are not allowed to do anything scholarly. So reading and writing are off limits for men, math is off limits for men, science is off limits for men, and women are not allowed to fight or anything violent like that. So yeah, Renarin is more woman-like because he can't fight. Then there is Toril Sadius. Sadius is the leader of the army that Kaladin is a slave in, and Kaladin is another of the main characters. So we'll get into a little synopsis a little bit later, and you'll learn more about the characters. But as of right now, just know that Sadius technically owns Kaladin for the majority of the book. There's Taravangian, who is a seemingly infirm and senile old king of a different nation called Jakaved, and he is a lot more important than he seems, so he'll be an important player at least later on in the series. Then there is Erlaine, who is Parshendi, which I'll explain in a little bit. There's a lot of explaining that's going to be going on. But he's basically the race that the Alethi are at war against when the book is happening. But he is pretending to be a Parshman, which is like a version of the Parshendi that cannot think and are slaves to the Alethi. Then there's Teft, who is a member of Kaladin's bridge crew, and again, Kaladin is one of the main characters. And he's kind of like, he used to be a sergeant, but he has a gambling addiction, he has an addiction to a drug, so he was made into a slave, and now he's part of Kaladin's group. There is Tien, who is Kaladin's little brother, who is dead as of the beginning of the story. Then there is the Stormfather, who is a very powerful Spren, which we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Then there is Silfrena, who is Kaladin's personal Spren. Then there's Kaladin, Shallan, and Dalinar, the main characters of the book. Now, some important terms that are going to come up again and again in this review is Spren. So Spren are kind of like the spirits of things. They're the spirit of change, essentially. So when something changes, a Spren is born. And there's a Spren for basically everything. There's Flame Spren, Water Spren, but there's also like Emotion Spren, like Fear Spren, there's Creation Spren, and then there's more like Concept Spren, like Honor Spren, and when these honor spren, or not just the honor spren, like these concept spren, when they bind to people, they give them magical powers. Then there are the heralds, and the knights radiant, and the almighty. So these three are in kind of a hierarchy. So the almighty is God, essentially. Then the heralds are kind of like angels. They were once humans, but then became something more, and they made an oath pact to kind of protect the world from demons. Then they trained the Knights Radiant, which are all the people who are bonded to those concept spren that have the magical powers, but they're basically just humans still. Then there is High Storms and Stormlight. So the Stormfather is a very powerful spren who creates a high storm, is what it's called, that kind of crosses back and forth across Roshar, the world that they're on. And this high storm, whenever it passes over a place, any gemstones become infused with Stormlight. So Stormlight is the currency of the world, because they have these little glass spheres with crystals in them, and the crystals become infused with Stormlight, and that's how you know that they're real. So that's the currency of the world. But it's also the thing that gives the Knights Radiance their magical powers. So A spren has to bond with a human in order for them to be capable of having magic, but for them to use magic, they also have to ingest stormlight. So you need a spren and stormlight in order to have these magical powers. Then there's something called shard plate and shard blades, and this is basically like really, really powerful armor and swords. So the armor is basically impenetrable. It can be broken, but it takes a lot of effort. And then it kind of shatters and it can be regrown with stormlight. And then the shard blades are special swords that will cut through literally anything, like perfectly slice through anything. However, they don't cut living things. They can sever a person's soul, but they won't cut the person's flesh. And then once the soul is dead, their eyes burn and they die. If you get like cut through a limb, the limb dies, and it can't be healed by any means. Then when a body is dead, after it's been killed, the shard blades can cut through the bodies because they're now objects. Another important term is bridgemen. That is what Kaladin is. They are slaves who carry bridges for Sadis's army, and they're basically cannon fodder, so they're not expected to survive. And that's kind of the struggle for Kaladin. Another important thing is the Way of Kings. And you might say, wickedly, that's the name of the book. Yes, that's because each book is named after a book within the book. So in this book, the important text that it centers around is called The Way of Kings. And that's why the book is called The Way of Kings. So there is a book that Dalinar reads within the story called The Way of Kings, and that is why it is called The Way of Kings. Another important term, these ones are important, Alethi and Shin. These are two different races. Parshendi as well is another race. So the Alethi are described as being much taller and having Asian features. So they're much taller than like normal people, like over 6 foot probably. And then the Shin are European people. They have lighter skin, they have bigger eyes, and they are shorter because they're closer to the original humans that were on the planet, which you didn't hear. The Parshendi, I will put up a picture of Erlaine right now. And they are kind of crab people, which is interesting. They have black, white, and red marbled skin. They can have it in any of those combinations. But yeah, and then they have hair strands rather than like hair. It's like thicker. And then they have shell carapace that they can grow if they're in a specific form. And they can also switch forms. So there's like a mate form, which is where they can have children. There's a war form, which is how they fight. There's a scholar form. And the way that they switch forms is by singing in a high storm. So they are very, very interesting, and we get a lot more information about them as the series goes on. But yeah, for now, not super important because we're mostly getting the perspective of the Alethi. Some more important terms: the Desolations, Voidbringers, and the Recreants. So I mentioned earlier some of the religious figures, the Heralds and the Knights Radiant. So the Heralds would come to Earth and they would train Knights Radiants for the Desolations, which is a period of war when Voidbringers, which are basically demons, would attack humans and they would have to fight them off using the magical powers that the Knights Radiant had. So this would happen over and over again, and the reason is that the 10 Heralds made an oath pact, like I mentioned earlier, that they would form a barrier around the hell, essentially, to hold the Voidbringers in hell. But while they do that, they're essentially being tortured for eternity until one of them finally breaks and lets the Voidbringers back onto Earth. So when the Voidbringers break through, the Heralds come back to Earth, start teaching the Knights Radiant, and then they fight, and then once that fight is over and all the Voidbringers are back in hell, all the Heralds go back into hell to hold them back, and it's just like a vicious cycle. Then there is the event that was called the Recreants. This is when the Knights Radiant abandoned their oaths. So the Knights Radiant do not exist in the current story because they have all abandoned their spren and their oaths. So nobody really knows what the Knight Radiants were, but they're kind of seen as like false prophets because of how they betrayed mankind. More important terms, High Prince, Dark Eyes, and Light Eyes. So there is a very big class divide in this book series. The Dark Eyes are considered peasants, so that's people like me with like dark eyes, brown eyes, dark green, that kind of thing. Light Eyes are considered royals, blessed by the Almighty. And then High Princes are the highest of the high. There are 9 High Princes and then the king, and each High Prince owns like a 1/10 of the kingdom of Alethkar. So they each have their own province that they watch over, and then within that there's more hierarchy structure of different lords and stuff like that. But the 10 main ones are the king and the High Princes, which Dalinar is a High Prince, his nephew Elhokar is the king, and then Sadeas is also a High Prince. Then just some environmental terms. There are, this world is very rocky and there's not a whole lot of plants. The only place that has like regular grass that you and I would think of is Shinovar. And then the rest of it is all like rock plants. So there are like rock buds, which are plants that, and all the plants kind of close up in water. So yeah. And then there are chasm fiends, which the main plot takes place on the Shattered Plains, which is like a series of chasms kind of. And inside those chasms are chasm fiends. And the chasm fiends are basically giant crabs. One thing you should know about the Stormlight Archives is that everything is crabs. But yeah, then some important places, just the planet that they are on is called Roshar. I mentioned this a little bit. Here's a map of Roshar. Some important places on that map are Alethkar, which is where the main characters live for the most part. Then Jakaved, which is where Taravangian is the king, and Shallan also comes from Jakaved. Carburanth, which is where Shallan is for the majority of this book, specifically in the Palanium, which is like a library, like a very big library. And Carburanth is called the City of Bells. So yeah, but she is studying there with Jasnah for the majority of the book. And then finally the Shattered Plains, which is, again, it's a giant expanse of plains that was shattered by some event, and then it's broken the ground, and it has these really deep chasms that they have to like work around because that's where the war is. Yeah, and then quick synopsis. There are 3 main characters in book 1 of the Stormlight Archives, which is The Way of Kings. Kaladin, a former surgeon, then soldier, and now slave, who is fighting for his freedom and the ability to protect the people that he cares about. There's Shallan, a low-level, light-eyed woman whose family is facing ruin. So she's still a lady, but she's not like super high up in the government. Like, she's not like very influential. The only way for her to save them is for her to become Princess Jasnah's ward and steal her Soulcaster, which I forgot to mention. The Soulcaster is sort of a magical device that can change anything into any other thing. So if you touched a rock, you could change it into smoke or blood or marble. And that's how her father was keeping their family above the water, was he had a Soulcaster that nobody knows how he got it, because Soulcasters are only supposed to be used by the Ardents, who are basically monks. But Jasnah, the princess, also has a Soulcaster, so Shallan thinks that her best chance after her father died is to go steal that Soulcaster. And then finally Dalinar, he was a former warlord called the Blackthorn, who starts seeing visions in high storms, and he has to reconcile who he used to be, this like monster kind of, with who he's becoming, and the fact that the kingdom he helped build is being torn apart by the war. All of this is set against the backdrop of the war again between the Alethi and the Parshendi on the Shattered Plains. So now that we've gotten all of that, you know, world building terminology out of the way, let me tell you what I rated this book. This book is my 6 out of 5 stars, because everybody has 5 stars, but then like your favorite books that are even above the other 5-star reads that you've had, that's what this is for me. So I give it 6 stars because I just love it so much. That was a little bit spoilery. However, as we get more into the video, there's going to be more and more spoilers. So this is the final spoiler warning for anyone who doesn't want to get the whole book spoiled for them, because I'm going to go really in depth about explaining this book. That's kind of what the purpose of this video is. It's over-explaining. So yeah, if you do decide to read this book and click out now, let me know down in the comments. But if you want to hear more about the book, stay tuned. I've already been talking for 30 minutes, so my voice is kind of wrecked. If I sound kind of sick, that's why. Please ignore it. But yeah, let's move into the technical, like how technically good his book is. Honestly, if I were rating it on technicality, like how well written it is, I'd probably give it 4 stars, because there is a few problems that I want to go over. The main problem with this book is the pacing, and Brandon Sanderson himself has even said that if he hadn't been an established author with the Mistborn series and all the other books that he wrote before the Stormlight Archives, he never would have gotten away with writing a book this slow. It is very, very heavy on world building. So, because as you can tell from all the lore dumping I just did, explaining it in any way really needs a lot of context. So it is very, very thick. This book is 1,300 pages, and most of it is world building. However, once you do get into it, I think it's a really good read. So I didn't really mind all the world building that was happening, and the pacing didn't bother me super much, except when it was Shallan's perspective, because Shallan has the slowest character arc in the book, and I kept wanting to just skip her perspective because all of her chapters were just like her reading. So I wanted to get back to Kaladin where the action was happening. But I do like it despite the pacing. But if you have a problem with patience and sitting through like long things, this is probably not going to be the book for you. If you liked The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's books, you will probably be okay with how long and detailed it is. But even then, he's probably more detailed than Tolkien was. So, but that brings me into the writing style and prose. And I've actually heard people say that they don't like Brandon Sanderson's prose because it's very technical and straightforward. I'm autistic, and maybe that's the reason, but I really like how straightforward and easy to read his text is. There's no extra flowery language. It's very easy to read, very self-explanatory, and it gives enough description that you can visualize things really well. But it is very technical writing. Even so, it's still written very well. There's not a lot of grammar issues or anything like that. It's very technically good, but people just find it a little dry. I disagree. I really like his prose, but I guess it's kind of like up to the individual. Another thing that I really liked about this book series is how original it is. Like, this is such a unique series that I really think everyone should experience it because it's just such a novelty. And, you know, I explained a lot of the things that happen, and like, this book is nothing like anything you've ever read before. Like, the magic system is so different, and it's a hard magic system, which I love personally, because I like knowing all the rules about magic. I am a very world building oriented person, so I literally can sit through just pages and pages of world building with literally no plot, and I will be enjoying myself. But for people who are more plot oriented, maybe you won't like this. But it's so unique and creative, and I really love it. I really admire Brandon Sanderson's ability to come up with all these crazy original magic systems and things. Immersive, because you just get to be inside these characters and you know like every facet of their life. Like, I could tell you anything about this world. Like, literally anything about this world, I could tell you about it. You want to know about the different races that are on this planet. You want to know about their leaders. You want to know where the planet came from. Like, how did the people get here? How the gods came to be. Like, I know everything about this world. That's how detailed it is. And that really adds to the immersivity of it. However, because of the pacing being a little bit slow, it does kind of pull you out sometimes, especially if there's a character you hate. Like, I hated Shalon when I first read this book. I want to say I do not hate Shalon anymore. Shalon is an amazing character. I just hated her when I read the first book because her perspective was so boring to me. But yeah, and just the world building is incredible. Like, that is where Brandon Sanderson truly excels, is in the world building. The next thing I want to talk about is his characters. I love his characters. They feel like real people, and they all have their own unique personalities that I really love. Shalon is like fiery and sarcastic, but so optimistic at the same time. And she lies to herself as much as she lies to other people. Like, I love her. And then Kaladin is depressed and sensitive, and he really struggles with finding the balance between how much to care. And I really relate to Kaladin. So I love his character because he feels so real. Like, I've been there. And Dalinar, he feels like a dad. Like, Dalinar is everyone's dad, and I love Dalinar. Adolin is another favorite of mine, and Renarin especially. Renarin actually took the title of my favorite character in book 5, because I didn't like Kaladin's arc in book 5, but we'll get there. But yeah, so I really love all of these characters, and you learn more and more about them, and they just develop more and more, and they feel so real. And their character arcs are all so good, except for Kaladin in the 5th book. But I do love their character arcs, and Kaladin specifically, up until the 5th book, like, his was my favorite. I loved seeing him develop, and you can really see what causes him to change and how it affects him, and it's just incredible. I also really like how Brandon Sanderson handles like sensitive topics in his writing. He really tackles a lot of big issues, and he does them surprisingly well. Like, when I found out that Brandon Sanderson was a cis, straight, white Mormon man, I was shocked because he writes these things so well, like he's experienced them. And it's just, he obviously did his research into these things. And I love him for that because it is incredible to read. Jasna's feminism is so realistic and wonderful. I love her being feminist. She's not like a caricature or anything. She's a very nuanced character. And on that note, or like her atheism and religious trauma as well. Like, I love Jasna. There's actually a quote that I have here somewhere. I have 3 full pages of quotes. And I had to stop there because I was like, I am never going to get through this book review if I keep just picking every single quote. So it says, "But the Almighty determines what is right." And Jasna says, "Must someone, some unseen thing, declare what is right for it to be right? I believe that my own morality, which answers only to my heart, is more sure and true than the morality of those who do right only because they fear retribution." And I think that's a really great depiction of atheism, because that's kind of how I feel. Like, if you need a God to tell you what's right and wrong, then you're not actually doing it because it's right. I also love how he deals with sexuality and sexism. He has several gay characters. There's at least 4 that I can think of off the top of my head. He has at least 2 trans characters and 2 non-binary characters, including a non-binary Spren, which was really interesting. And he wrote them very nuanced. They're not caricatures. And I really, really appreciate the representation that he gives. There are no lesbians, which is a little bit, you know, I wish there were some lesbians or some sapphics. But I do like the depictions of queer people that he has. He also tackles racism and classism in a really nuanced way with the Parshendi versus the Alethi, and then the dark eyes versus the light eyes. And there's a lot of talking about prejudice, and especially Kaladin. Kaladin is a very prejudiced character, but he's written in a way that challenges this, and he like overcomes it, and it deals with his preconceived notions very well. And he learns and grows, and I think he's a great character because of that. Like, he didn't start out perfect, and that's kind of what I love about him. But yeah, all of these things are depicted very well, very nuanced, and I just think it's really great to see, especially in a book written by a straight white man. Now we get into the part where I actually over-explain this book series. So I'm gonna go through, I have notes, lots and lots of notes. There are, let's see, 75 chapters, plus a prelude, a prologue, and an epilogue. So 78 chapters total, and I'm kind of gonna go through all my notes and just tell you everything that happens in this book. By the time I'm finished, you will be able to say that you've read this book. Like, the prelude to the Stormlight Archive. This is from the perspective of Kelak, who is one of the 10 heralds, and he's wandering through this war-torn landscape where there's tons of dead humans, other beasts, and Voidbringer bodies, and he's going to the predetermined meeting place for all the heralds. Like, they all agree where to meet after the battle, before the battle starts, to meet with those who have survived the desolation. But when he gets there, he finds only one person waiting, and it's their leader, Jezrien. He assumed that the other 8 must have, like, died in the fight, which has happened before, but it's not super common, and that they all went back to hell already. But he notices all of the honor blades, which are basically, like, souped up shard blades that give people powers instead of the spren. So he sees all the other people's honor blades except for one, Taln, and all of them have been driven into the rock, and Jezrien tells him that they've all agreed to break the Oath Pact, and Taln will be the only one to stay in hell, essentially, because he's the only one that died in the fight, so he automatically went back to hell and leave their swords behind and never meet again. So yeah, it's kind of foreshadowing the fact that honor is kind of dead in this book series. And the heralds are not as godly as they seem to everybody in the books. Next is the prologue, and this is from the perspective of Seth, so Seth Sun Villano. And I really like the opening line of this because it's just very intriguing. So the opening line is, Seth Sun Villano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. Very interesting beginning, and you do have to, like, skip the prelude to get to it, but I think that's really, really interesting. And then it says, white to be bold, white to not blend into the night, white to give warning. For if you were going to assassinate a man, he was entitled to see you coming. And it kind of sets up the fact that Seth and the Parshendi, who, surprise, are the ones who ordered him to kill the king. They are very honorable people. This is a Parshendi tradition. And so when this happens, the Alethi are all celebrating signing a peace treaty with the Parshendi. And Seth is being employed by the Parshendi, who have his oath stone, which again, he is honor bound to obey anything they tell him to do except kill himself. And Seth has an honor blade. So he has one of the blades that gives powers without needing a spren attached to it. So it's kind of just unchecked power. He goes to kill the king, basically. And Gavilar, the king at the time, is really confused. And he's like, why would the Parshendi kill me? And he hands Seth a weird black sphere and tells him to take it and not give them to the Parshendi. And he tells him that his last words are for his brother Dalinar, one of the main characters, and it's to find the most important words a man can say. And as a Shin, the last words of a dying man are considered sacred, so he leaves a note for Dalinar written in Gavilar's blood, and then he leaves with the sphere. And then we move on to a flashback, not a prologue, but a flashback, and it is from the perspective of a minor character named Sen, and he is a new recruit in Bright Lord Meridos Amaram's army. He's terrified because he's about to go to war and he has literally no training. He barely knows how to hold his spear. And he has been pulled into a new squad at the very last minute for some reason that he can't really understand. He finds out that Kaladin kind of paid to get him there, and he doesn't understand why he would pay for an untrained soldier. But another character tells Sen that he's in Kaladin Stormblessed's team, and he can't, like, Kaladin Stormblessed will protect them. They never lose any men, or they lose the least men, at least. They start fighting, and a shard bearer comes, which the shard plate and shard blades are very, very important in this culture, and if a Dark Eyes were to win one, they would become a Light Eyes. But yeah, so a shard bearer comes, and Sen blacks out, and then the scene cuts out. So that's kind of our introduction to Kaladin, is that he's Stormblessed, and he's an incredible fighter. And then the next chapter, we are in finally the present, from Kaladin's perspective. He is in a slave caravan, and he is kind of toying with leaves of a poisonous plant, and he wants to use it on the slave trader that is driving the caravan. A windspren, which again, the spren are spirits of everything. A windspren appears as like a young woman and starts talking to Kaladin and asks what the Blackbane is. And Kaladin is shocked because spren aren't supposed to be able to talk. Like, some of the bigger ones, like windspren, can sometimes mimic, but she knows his name, which he's never said out loud to anyone in the slave caravan, and like, she's actively talking to him, so he's confused. The slave trader goes to inspect a sick slave, and Kaladin tells him that he knows what sickness the guy has, and that he'll survive if he gives him just like a little bit extra water. And then the slave trader kills him, and Kaladin is pissed because he feels like everyone he tries to save dies, and he's left alone to survive. When he is angry at the slave's murder, he like hits the bars of the wagon, and the Blackbane leaves that were in his hands, they fall, and he loses it, and he feels really, really hopeless. Then the third chapter is from Shallan's point of view now, and she arrives on a ship called the Wind's Pleasure, and into Carboranth, the city of bells, and she hears that Jasna Colin, who she has been chasing for several months at this point, is still in the city, which is great because she requested to be Jasna's ward, and Jasna had told her to meet her in a city, but then she left before Shallan got there, and she kept doing this every single city. So it's been months. And Shallan is like really nervous at this point because she has to find some source of income, like the soulcaster that she's trying to steal. She has to find it soon. She finally finds Jasna, and that's where the chapter ends. Then Kaladin is back in the slave wagon. The slave trader is kind of lost, and he remembers that Kaladin was a soldier and he might know the land. But when he asks Kaladin to help him find the way, Kaladin tears his map and tells the slave trader that he doesn't know the way out. And then the slave trader, he says, if I ever find a portrait of my ex-wife, I'll make sure to send it your way, because he tore up the map. And Kaladin is like, dang it, this guy is likable, actually. And he's like, I didn't say he wasn't a bastard, he's just a likable bastard, which is the worst kind. That's not even in my list of quotes, I just know this book so well. The slave trader tells Kaladin that he knows that Kaladin hates Bright Lord Amaram, the guy who he used to serve, more than he hates the slave trader. And Kaladin realizes that if he knows the truth about Amaram, then he also knows that Kaladin isn't actually a deserter, which is what the official story when he was sold is. And the slave trader acknowledges that, but he says that that's the story they're going to stick to because it'll be easier to sell him that way. The Windspren had left during the high storm, but she comes back and Kaladin realizes that they're on their way to the Shattered Plains, which is where the war is. And he is hoping that he'll be able to fight again because he loved fighting. And so that's kind of the only hope that he has. Back with the Shallan, she thinks that Jasnah is really, really beautiful. And when she sees her first, Jasnah is talking to King Taravangian, who is the king of Carbaranth. And they are negotiating something. But Jasnah tells Shallan that since she was so persistent in following her, like that was a test, but that since she was so persistent, she'll hear her petition to be her ward. And Shallan is like, I thought I already was your ward. But they have like a really long conversation about Shallan's level of education. And they find out that she's good at a lot of things, but kind of not good at history and philosophy. Then she sees Jasnah soulcast stone into smoke. And then Jasnah goes to the Palladium, which is like a really big library. Jasnah says no, Shallan cannot be her ward because she doesn't know anything about history or philosophy. And Shallan is pissed at this, but she decides to keep trying. And this is when we kind of find out that the reason that she wants to be her ward so bad is because she needs to steal her soulcaster. Back with Kaladin, and they have arrived in the Shattered Plains at High Prince Sadius's war camp, and they are taken to a woman who decides whether or not they will be sold to her. Like, she's not sure which ones she'll buy. Kaladin tries to convince her to let him fight, and the slave trader tells her that Kaladin is a deserter, which means that he can't fight anymore. And she decides to make them members of the new bridge crew. Or not the new bridge crew. She decides to make them members of bridge crews. So Kaladin immediately likes his new supervisor, Gaz. And because of this, Gaz puts him in the worst bridge, without shoes or a vest. And he's put like at the front of the bridge. Hours of carrying the bridge, which is really, really heavy, and he's out of shape from being a slave. And arrows start to hit the people who are carrying the bridges. Kaladin is the only one who survives on the front row of the bridge. Later, he falls asleep, and then the Windspren who's been following him wakes him up with like a shock, and he realizes that he's going to be left behind if he doesn't get up. And then she tells him that her name is Silfrena, and then she's like, it would seem that I have a nickname, Sil. And he's like, congratulations. And he goes back to the camp. With Shallan, she also goes to the Palladium, hoping to convince Jasnah that she is worthy to be her ward. And she is allowed to wait for Jasnah in her reading alcove, though she's not allowed into the Palladium. She starts sketching and writes a letter to Jasnah containing arguments for why she should actually be allowed to be Jasnah's ward. She is interrupted by a monk-type person, like an ardent, named Capsule, and he asks to wait for Jasnah as well with Shallan, and he praises her sketching ability. He tells Shallan that he's trying to convert Jasnah, who is, very clearly stated an atheist, to Vorinism, which is the religion in the book. He leaves and asks her to let Jasnah know that he wanted to speak with her. She goes to leave after a while, and Jasnah appears finally. Then we get another of Jasnah, or of Shallan's perspectives, and Jasnah is like, I already told you no, and Shallan is embarrassed, but and she goes to leave, but Jasnah calls her back and gives her her money pouch, and is like, sorry, I was cross. Shallan asks Jasnah to read the letter, and Jasnah is impressed that she's self-taught and agrees to accept her once she has adequately learned philosophy and history. And Shallan is like, great, but can I learn this fast enough to save my house? She leaves, goes back to the people that are that were on the ship that carried her for months, so she's kind of friends with them. And they kind of insist that she's talented enough to be Jasnah's ward if she just like keeps pushing. So she buys a bunch of like history and philosophy books and starts studying to learn it all before Jasnah leaves Carbaranth. But before long, Jasnah finds her because she paid the servants to tell her if Shallan returned to the Palanium. And she asks to see Shallan's satchel, and she finds her sketches and notes on biology, and she asks why she made them, and Shallan says because she wanted to. And ultimately, it's the fact that Shallan wants to be a scholar even in her free time, plus the fact that she's been so insistent that finally convinces Jasnah to accept her as her ward. And Shallan's like, yes, the first step of the plan is complete, but she still needs to complete the rest of it. Kaladin is back in the perspective chapter. He's been a member of the bridge crew for a couple of weeks. He is the only man still alive, and Syl leaves because she is upset at how like depressed he is. Kaladin thinks that he's like dead inside and starts crying. And I love Kaladin, so it really hurts my heart when he's sad. But also I relate to him so much. Then we get another flashback. Cal, which was his nickname when he was a little kid, this is 9 years ago, is helping his father treat a young woman because his father was a surgeon. And then Kaladin kind of wants to learn to fight and become a soldier, and his father tells him that there are only two types of people in the world. There are two kinds of people in this world, son. Those who save lives and those who take lives. And what of those who protect and defend? Those who save lives by taking lives. That's like trying to stop a storm by blowing harder. Ridiculous. You can't protect by killing. And that's kind of like the crux of Kaladin's character. Like, he is so sensitive to other people. Like, he's so empathetic, even though he's kind of misanthropic. And he really struggles with finding the balance between saving and killing, protecting and hurting. And that's kind of like his whole character, like that's the struggle that defines him. But anyways, after the flashback, we go back to Kaladin's perspective in the present, and he's outside just after a high storm, so it's raining, and he goes to a place called the Honor Chasm, which is basically, it's considered the last honor that a bridgeman can have, which is he can jump. Gaz stops him and says like, oh, you're trying to steal something, but Kaladin just ignores him and like goes to the chasm. And he stands there and he's about to jump when Syl reappears carrying a blackbane leaf, like the poisonous leaf that Kaladin had been holding in the cart. And because she thought it might make Kaladin happy, because the last time he seemed like himself was when he had that poison, and that's when everything seemed to go wrong, is when he lost it. And Kaladin is like, everybody that I try to protect dies. And Syl tells him like, the bridgemen are gonna die anyways, so if you try to protect them, it can't hurt them. Like, they're gonna die anyways. And she convinces him to try again. So he goes back and attacks Gaz and demands that Gaz make him the leader of Bridge 4. And he agrees that Gaz will receive 1/5 of his wages because slaves are still paid, and if they get enough money, they can eventually supposedly pay off their slave debt. It's happened before, but it's pretty hard, so it's not something that most slaves try to do. He goes inside and starts like forcing the other bridgemen to give him their names, and he notices how pathetic they are. Then we get the perspective of a random fisherman in the Pure Lake, which is a different country. And there is a group of foreigners who ask for they're looking for a man named Hoyd. And Hoyd is in every single book in the Cosmere. Hoyd is one of my favorites, so we'll find out who Hoyd is because we have met him already. So yeah, but Hoyd is a good character. Then there is a chapter from Shallan's brother, Balat, and he tortures small animals, and he tries to convince himself that he isn't a coward for staying home while Shallan goes to do the work of saving their family. And then it kind of ends. Then there's a perspective of Seth, who he is now kind of like a carnival attraction. The guy who owns him just like showing him off. He demonstrates the way that Seth kind of does whatever he's told, making him like jumping down and cut his arm. But when he orders Seth to kill himself, he says that he can't be ordered to kill himself. And people say that he acts like a Light Eyes. But anyways, so Took is killed by a group of thugs, and then one of them picks up Seth's oathstone and he tells them about his obligation to serve them if they have the oathstone. And the man starts wondering what he should do with him. There is another chapter. This one is Adolin and Dalinar. So Adolin is kind of a perspective character, but he's not really a main character in this book. So Adolin goes on a hunt for a chasm fiend, those giant crab creatures, with his dad, his brother, his cousin, the king, and Sadeas. He's worried about Dalinar's behavior because Dalinar is having fits and visions during high storms, and he's worried that his dad is going mad. And Dalinar races Elhokar, and he remembers the voice in his dreams that says to unite them. So he lets his nephew beat him to the top of the place that they're racing. And then Adolin gives a report to Dalinar. They go back. So they have a conversation with the king's Wit. And Wit tells Dalinar that Renarin, his younger son, isn't as fragile as he thinks he is. And they meet with Elhokar and Sadeas again. And then something goes wrong and the chasm fiend that they've been hunting suddenly appears on the platform that they're on instead of the plateau that it was supposed to take place on. They all try to kill the chasm fiend before it can hurt anybody. And finally they cut off its legs and kill it. Then we go back to Kaladin's perspective, and he's resolved that he is going to fight to be better despite his terrible circumstances. He tries to wake all the bridgemen up early, and they all kind of refuse. Kaladin physically carries Moshe out of the barack, and so the rest of them kind of reluctantly get up because they know he'll force them. And he informs them that instead of sleeping in, they will be training now, and that he intends to do everything he can to make sure that Bridge 4 doesn't lose any more men. The other bridgemen refuse to do this, and Gaz tells them that they don't have to. Kaladin goes to Gaz to get his pay for the week, and then he takes all 5 of them. Gaz is like, wait, you said I could have a fifth of it. And he's like, give me all of my money. So Gaz does. He gives him all 5 spheres, and then Kaladin hands one back to him to make sure that he remembers where the money is coming from. He spends the morning training, running back and forth with a board from a bridge, and he does this for several hours before meeting the men of Bridge 4. Syl tells Kaladin that she's changing, that she's remembering things and understanding new things and concepts and ideas. And Kaladin realizes that she feels similarly about her transition as he does about his current like living situation. Scared to go onward, Kaladin said, but terrified to go back to what you were. And I love Kaladin. All my favorite quotes from this book are from Kaladin's perspective. But yeah, so then we go back to Adolin and Dalinar's perspective. They're kind of cleaning up the Chasm Fiend attack, and he notes that a lot of people are treating Dalinar slightly better after he rescued Elhokar when the Chasm Fiend started attacking, and he thinks that it won't last. He goes to Elhokar's pavilion to give his final like casualty report, and then inside the pavilion, Elhokar is like chastising Dalinar for not trying to win gem hearts, which are the hearts of the Chasm Fiends that are really, really valuable because they can be used for soul casting. And this sparks an argument, kind of. And Adolin calls Sadeas a coward, and Sadeas calls Renarin useless, which almost starts a war, and he retracts his statement. And then Wit appears and taunts Sadeas because Sadeas is kind of stupid. And then he actually praises Renarin's intelligence. Like, he says to Sadeas, "Can you speak and say nothing foolish?" And Sadeas says, "I think." And Wit is like, "Wrong, you've already said something foolish because I don't believe you can think," or something like that. And then he turns to Renarin and he says, "How about you, Renarin? Can you speak and say nothing foolish?" And Renarin says, "Nothing foolish." Like, he literally says, "Nothing foolish." And Wit is like talking about how intelligent Renarin is. Elhokar's saddle broke when they were hunting the Chasm Fiend, which put him in a lot of danger, which is how Dalinar saved him. And they kind of go examine the strap to see if it was cut or not. And then he wonders why, like Adolin wonders why they even care. But he realizes that Elhokar believes it was cut as an assassination attempt. Because Elhokar is getting like more and more paranoid. So Dalinar wants the strap to be taken to a leather worker to examine, and like he wants to investigate what happened. So Sadeas approaches, and they kind of leave, and Dalinar tells Adolin that even though he hates Sadeas, he's sure that he wouldn't like try to hurt Elhokar. And he reveals that there was a decoy the night of Gavilar's assassination, like when he was killed, and Sadeas was the decoy trying to lead Seth away so that Gavilar could escape. And Sadeas swore to protect Elhokar at all costs. And then Elhokar asks if they've learned anything about the saddle, and he's like insisting that someone is trying to kill him, and Dalinar is like, "You're overreacting." So then they all kind of leave, and Dalinar is like upset because he doesn't know the meaning of Gavilar's last words. We have another flashback from Kaladin. He's talking to his friend Laurel, and he's talking to her about his plans, his father's plans for him to be a surgeon. Laurel thinks he should become a soldier and win a shard plate and blade for himself, and then Kaladin's little brother Tien interrupts and gives Kaladin a rock to make him feel better. And then they go hunting for lurgs, which are small, slimy creatures. I think they're kind of like snails. Go to talk to some of the other boys, and the other boys are talking about how his father, like Jost, another random boy's father, was cheated out of a shard blade, and Kaladin is like, the area where he fought wouldn't have any shard bearers, so he must be remembering it wrong. And Jost is like, "Are you calling my father a liar?" And Kaladin's like, "No, I'm just saying he's remembering wrong." So Jost, challenges Kaladin to fight him. Kaladin is like surprisingly good with a staff, but he's still not as good as Jost, who's had actual practice. Tien helps him up and they go home. And Kaladin learns that the city lord and Laurel's father, his friend's father, is dead. And he left Kaladin a large number of spheres, like the currency, the little spheres filled with stormlight, for him to go to Carboranth and train as a surgeon, then go back to Hearthstone, the town where he lives. This one, we're back in the present day, and Kaladin visits an apothecary hoping to get like a like Neosporin, like an antibiotic or antiseptic, whatever. But the apothecary is charging a lot more than Kaladin can afford, so he just gets some bandages and sewing material. And then he has to go on a bridge run, and every time the bridge stops, Kaladin keeps standing rather than collapsing like most people do. And when they reach the final chasm, Kaladin takes the front position of the bridge, because he carries the bridge from the worst position all the time. 4 of the other men that were in the front are like hit with arrows and killed almost immediately, but Kaladin takes like really minor injuries only because the arrows kind of just zip past him. Then once the bridge is placed, he starts finding bridgemen who were wounded in the approach, and he starts treating them as a surgeon. He has his men carry the wounded men back to camp. So Gaz hates the idea, but Kaladin gives him an extra bribe, which is a dun sphere, so a sphere that doesn't have stormlight anymore, even though it was infused right before the battle. Then we're back in Adolin and Dalinar's perspective. So Adolin visits the leather workers, and they tell him that the strap on the saddle was definitely cut, but it's possible it was from the buckle on the saddle. Then there's a horn that signals that a chasm fiend has been spotted close enough for Dalinar's men to reach it first, because all of the high princes are kind of fighting over these gem hearts. Adolin is disappointed when Dalinar doesn't want to go after it, but Dalinar is working with his scribes to try and manipulate the other high princes into following Elhokar, like actually following him rather than just following him in name. Renarin comes to talk to Dalinar, and Dalinar promises that if he gets a new set of shard plate and a shard blade, that they will go to Renarin to help compensate for his epilepsy and allow him to fight. Adolin seeks out a fighting Ardent, which is again like a monk, to ask his opinion on Dalinar's visions during the high storm. The monk expresses the opinion that Dalinar is either going insane or that the visions are just products of his own mind, so like he's imagining them either way. Dalinar goes to Elhokar and asks him how long he intends to continue the war, and suggests that he withdraws from the war, which it's a vengeance war to avenge Elhokar's father and Dalinar's brother. So Elhokar is like shocked that Dalinar would even consider it. Dalinar backs down, saying that they need a new approach though, a way to win the war instead of just like outlasting the Parshendi. Dalinar tries to convince Elhokar to appoint him High Prince of War, which back when the kingdom was really united, they all had unique jobs. And Elhokar says he'll consider it. Dalinar leaves, and he has to take shelter to avoid a high storm, and they like barely make it inside before the storm hits. Then when the storm hits, Dalinar realizes that he is no longer in the place that he was before, but in a barn. He has a vision of strange dark creatures bursting into the walls of this barn and attacking. Dalinar fights it off and finds a woman, and he realizes that the woman and the girl think that he is the woman's husband and the girl's father, and that he's like inhabiting a different body. He tries to fight off these creatures, but just before he was going to be like killed in the vision, Knights Radiant appear and kill the creatures, and they invite Dalinar to train as a Radiant. Then they leave, and Dalinar hears a voice, the voice of the Almighty is what he thinks it is, and it tells him to unite them and offers like cryptic advice, but it's not super helpful. And Dalinar asks if he should continue to trust Sadeas, and the voice says yes. He's still wondering like what's going on with it, but yeah, then he ends this vision and leaves. Then we're back in the past with Kaladin. Kaladin is doing surgery on a little girl from his village. He starts trying to stop her bleeding, and he succeeds, but then he realizes that the success in stopping the bleeding was not because he treated her, but because she died. He is grieving over this, trying to cope with the fact that he wasn't able to save her. And his father tells him that his work had been good and that her death wasn't his fault. But Kaladin can still hear the girl's father, Harl, screaming. "You have to learn when to care, son," Lirin said softly. Lirin is Kaladin's father. "And when to let go. You see, I had a similar problem when I was younger. You'll grow calluses." "And this is a good thing," Cal thought, another tear trickling down his cheek. "You have to learn when to care and when to let go." In the distance, Harl continued to wail. Then we're back in the present with Kaladin. Kaladin is like wondering if he should even get up, but he forces himself up and then realizes that the other bridgemen were waiting to see if he would, and he continues training. He goes to check on the wounded from the previous day. Two of them are mostly fine, but one of them really needs that antiseptic that he wanted to get, so he washes the wounds with water the best he can. He talks to Syl, and she tells him that some of the men think that he's crazy, and asks him why men lie. Kaladin is not able to give her an answer on that. Syl says that the king's uncle, Dalinar, doesn't lie, but Kaladin says, like, if someone has light eyes, then they lie. Gaz tells Kaladin that Sadeas has ordered that his wounded men will not receive any food or pay for the duration of the time that they can't run bridges. Kaladin is pissed because that means that he has to find another way to care for them, which is just another hassle. Kaladin goes to the rest of the men and asks them to split their food and contribute some pay for medical supplies. Most of them just laugh at him, but Rock, one of the main guys, agrees to share his food with the man that he feels is like the least wounded and has the best chance of recovering, because he feels like he owes Kaladin for running the death line for him the previous day. Rock says that he can see Syl, the Spren, which is unusual because she hasn't specifically revealed herself to him, so most people can't see her. Kaladin goes to Gaz and is assigned to stone gathering because they have to do a job every day aside from running the bridges. So they go stone gathering, and he convinces two of the men, Rock again, and Teft, the old grizzled sergeant that we talked about a little bit in the character section. He convinces them to help him gather these reeds that have antiseptic in them while they do the rock gathering. Then we're back in Dalinar's perspective. Dalinar goes with his sons to the king's feast, which the king feasts like every day, which Dalinar doesn't like because he thinks that they're like living in excess. Adolin tells him that the leather workers said the strap was cut, but it could have been an accident still. They talk about the fact that the king is getting more and more paranoid, which is due to the fact that his father was assassinated, but like he's really, really crazy about people assassinating him. Dalinar doesn't want to talk about the visions that he has during the high storm, and said that the rumors were probably worse than the truth. He doesn't like how sloppy people are during a war, because there are war codes and nobody else is following them. Wit sits at a stool at the entrance and insults everyone. He warns Dalinar that his suggestion to abandon the Vengeance Pact has like spread as a rumor. And then Lady Navani, Gavilar's widow, shows up, having arrived at the Shattered Plains just now. Dalinar tries to hide the fact that he's attracted to her, addressing her as his sister because she's his sister-in-law. Elhokar announces that because of the cut saddle strap, he's going to appoint Sadeas as the High Prince of Information to investigate. This is kind of like a dig at Dalinar because he thinks that Dalinar is not seriously investigating it, and Dalinar realizes that Sadeas outmaneuvered his High Prince of War idea. Then we go back to Kaladin's perspective. Bridge 4 is back on rock duty. And the reason that they are collecting rocks is to find stones to soulcast into food. Kaladin has Rock and Teft still looking for the weed to extract the antiseptic sap from. Syl leads Rock to them because he can see her. Kaladin realizes that even though he's saved lives in Bridge 4, no one is going to follow him unless he finds a way to make their lives worth living. They get the knob weed, which is the weed that has the antiseptic in it, and they squeeze it out into like discarded liquor bottles. He finds out that Rock used to be a cook until he snuck chol dung, which chols are basically like smaller versions of chasm fiends. They're just big crabs that are kind of like cattle. And he snuck chol poop into Sadius's food, which is what caused him to be a slave. Teft asks Kaladin why he's a bridgeman, and Kaladin says he killed a man, though it wasn't murder and he was thanked by someone important. He says that he's a bridgeman because Light Eyes did not take it well when he turned down a gift. Then we're back in Dalinar and Adelin's perspective. Dalinar is waiting for High Prince Royan, which is just a random High Prince, to come meet him. So he's trying to unite the High Princes by joining forces with another prince on the on like a joint assault on a plateau. And since Royan has won like the least gem hearts, Dalinar tries to convince him that working together would be like better for both of them. Royan is suspicious, insinuating that Dalinar is like growing soft. And Royan says he'll think about it and leaves, but Dalinar doesn't really think he's gonna think about it. Adelin meets with Dalinar and asks him how it went, and when Dalinar says it went poorly, Adelin tells him that Sadius is asking for permission to enter the war camp to investigate the threat to the king. Adelin is worried that he's gonna create false evidence to like frame them for trying to kill Elhokar, but Dalinar told him like to allow it because his vision said to trust Sadius, and Adelin gets mad, telling him that staking the future of their entire like legacy on the hallucinations is stupid. And he says that his visions are just figments of his imagination. Dalinar tells him to leave. We're back in the past with Kaladin, and Cal hears people talking bad about his father because they think that the surgeons are kind of creepy because they don't understand them. They accuse him of stealing the spheres that he said that the Bright Lord left for them. And they're suspicious of the fact that Lirin can write because men aren't supposed to be able to write in this society. Cal meets with his mother, who tells him don't hate them for repeating what they've heard. They respect him, but they're intimidated because he's so much higher up than they are. And Cal realizes that his parents wanted to marry him off to Laurel. He's unsure of whether he wants to be a surgeon or if he wants to be a soldier because he really likes fighting. Then there's a new city lord, Roshon, and he does not like being in a backwater city. He blames Lirin because Lirin let Wistiao die, the previous city lord. And Cal's parents don't know if things are better or worse with the new city lord. We're back with Dalinar. Dalinar is having the Way of Kings read to him, and Renarin listens with him. But Dalinar's not comforted by it anymore. He's disturbed by his visions, and he tells Renarin that two High Princes have now refused his offer to ally. A horn sounds and tells them that a chasm fiend is nearby. And Dalinar finally allows everyone to go after the gem heart. Dalinar and Adelin attack the Parshendi that are also fighting for the gem heart. And there's something called the thrill that makes men excited and like happy when they kill, but he starts to feel the thrill and then is suddenly like repulsed by it. Like he hates the death around him. He keeps like fighting, but he feels like sick about it, and he hears a voice saying life before death, but nobody is close enough for it to be anyone near him. Dalinar wins and takes the gem heart. And then he notices that there is a Parshendi wearing shard plate, and he wonders why the shard bearer didn't participate in the battle. And it's kind of weird that the Parshendi have shard plate. It's not unheard of, but it's weird. Then we go back to Kaladin's perspective. Kaladin is trying to sell his knobweed sap, and the apothecary that he goes to pretends that wild knobweed isn't as effective, and he tries to like lie to Kaladin, but he sees through it and he gets like a better price. He considers trying to escape, but he can't like leave them anymore. He's kind of become attached to Bridge 4. Gaz changed Bridge 4's work duty to chasm duty, which is the worst one. They have to go down into the chasms and loot the bodies for like supplies. Yeah, so the other bridges kind of resent them for breaking the rules by bringing back wounded people. Down in the chasms, they're kind of looting, and Teft and Rock are talking to each other, which is good because they're starting to come out of their shells. They find a guy named Dunny listening, and try to get him to talk as well. So the tension starts going away and Dunny starts singing, but the rest of the crew is kind of still aloof. Kaladin picks up a spear and gets like overwhelmed by memories of the spear. And then the others start like jeering at him and they're like, I bet you've never even held a spear before. And Kaladin performs a kata, which is like a performative practice move. And they're kind of like in awe. Then he drops the spear and tells them to get back to work. Teft is obviously impressed, but Kaladin is like, no, don't even think about it. They find that Parshendi's armor is grown from their bodies. Like they grow a shell type of thing, and then they finish and go back up. Kaladin comes up with an idea to get the crew to kind of come together. He buys Rock a cauldron and supplies for stew, and Rock cooks a stew for all of the men of Bridge 4. And they all eventually come out and eat the stew, and the next morning a bunch more of them get up early to work out with Kaladin, which is exciting. We're back with Adeline and Dalinar. Dalinar realizes that a lot of people are being loyal to him when talking to Sadeas, and it's kind of undermining the issue because it kind of makes Dalinar look more guilty because they don't want to talk to Sadeas. Dalinar thinks that Adeline would be good as the High Prince and tries to decide whether he should abdicate his throne or not. And then he helps workers dig like a latrine pit, and he remembers a passage from the Way of Kings. I once saw a spindly man carrying a stone larger than his head upon his back. He stumbled beneath the weight, shirtless under the sun, wearing only a loincloth. He tottered down a busy thoroughfare. People made way for him, not because they sympathized with him, but because they feared the momentum of his steps. You dare not impede one such as this. The monarch is like this man, stumbling along, the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. Many give way before him, but so few are willing to step in and carry the stone. They do not wish to attach themselves to the work, lest they condemn themselves to a life full of extra burdens. I left my carriage that day and took up the stone, lifting it for the man. I believe my guards were embarrassed. One can ignore a poor shirtless wretch doing such labor, but none can ignore a king sharing the load. Perhaps we should switch places more often. If a king is seen to assume the burden of the poorest of men, perhaps there will be those who will help him with his own load, so invisible yet so daunting. So he picks up the load of the workers who are digging a bathroom, and everyone's kind of like, what are you doing? Royals don't do this. But yeah, he gets interrupted by Navani and tells him that they had an appointment, and he continues to work, but eventually he apologizes to her, and she tells him that Jasna is trying to write to them. So he quits and they go take the call. She wants to start a relationship with him, but Dalinar is like holding on to the tradition that a widowed sister-in-law is like actually considered a sister. Dalinar finds Adeline and a bunch of clerks and stuff waiting to take Jasna's like letter. He and Jasna talk about their family, and Jasna asks him to repeat his first encounter with Parshendi. She also wants to know when he first saw like shard blades with the Parshendi, and he replies that he only saw them once Gavilar was already dead. She tells Shallan to draw what is referred to in a book as a Voidbringer, although she doesn't believe that it is one. She just thinks that that's the worst thing that they could think of. They identify it as a chasm fiend, and Dalinar tells Jasnah to come back to the Shattered Plains as soon as possible. He tells Navani that he's going to abdicate to Adolin, and she thinks that's a really bad idea. Then we have some interludes again. We have Risen, who actually becomes a more important character later on in the series as well. She is a merchant's apprentice, and they are visiting Shinovar to trade with Shin. She is annoyed at the grass, like just regular grass that doesn't retract back into the ground like their grass does. But when the Shin arrive, she thinks that the guards are servants because they're dressed so plainly. And her Babsk is what it's called, her mentor, tells her that in Shin, that Shin farmers are the highest order and that warriors are the lowest. He trades with the Shin and asks if they have another servant like the one that he got 7 years ago, which is Seth, who was so obedient. And the guy that he's trading with says that he was worthless and that he hoped there would never be another one like him. Then we get the perspective of Axes the Collector, who is trying to catalog every spren. Then we get a perspective from Seth. My camera cut out, but so we get a perspective from Seth, and he finds his master like killed, and a new master is there who shows his old master's head and Seth's oathstone, and he's given like a list of noblemen to assassinate. Then we get back to Shallan. She's talking to her brothers, trying to figure out how to get Jasnah's soulcaster, and she tells her that friends of their fathers came by asking for the soulcaster back, and he thinks they're very dangerous. Balat has his fiance draw a picture of a symbol that was on the necklace worn by a servant who died, and he mentions that the friend had the same pattern on his thumb. Shallan then burns that the paper that was on. She is studying, and this was my biggest problem with her chapters, is that a lot of it is studying. And they argue a little bit about scholarship and philosophy. Later, Taravangian comes to their balcony to have lunch, and Taravangian asks about Jasnah's soulcaster, but she avoids the question. He asks Shallan to do a drawing of him, which he wants to gift to his granddaughter. And then Taravangian and Jasnah discuss Jasnah's lack of faith and the concept of right and wrong. And this is where that quote about the Almighty happens. Must someone, some unseen thing, declare what is right for it to be right? I believe that my own morality, which answers only to my heart, is more sure and true than the morality of those who do right only because they fear retribution. So I love that. But then we're back in Kaladin's perspective. Kaladin leaves the barracks and is followed by all the members of Bridge 4, finally. He thinks that the last holdout might have been bullied by Tefton Rock, but he kind of ignores it because at least they're doing it. He has them all do exercises, and the carpenters are kind of laughing at them. Kaladin notices Gaz, but decides that there's still some time to practice hauling the bridge. Gaz, we get a little bit of his perspective, because he is contemplating the loss of his eye, and he hates the darkness that waits in the corners of his eye. Lamaril, who is Gaz's boss, is really interested in Kaladin, noting that he's like a problem. Gaz is unsettled by the fact that they're training, and he wonders if Kaladin actually was in the military. they discuss the use of bridgemen, and they decide that Kaladin could become more dangerous. Gaz offers to kill him, but worries that he would lose Kaladin's bribes to him. And Lamarel tells him don't, because that would make him into a martyr, and he wants Kaladin to like fall on a run. And then he threatens Gaz into like he's gonna make him a bridgeman. Kaladin is practicing setting the bridge down from a raised position, and Kaladin is wondering what it would take for them to practice on a real chasm. He's surprised because the bridgemen are like oddly good, considering that they've only been training for like 2 weeks. He sends his team for a break. They had only lost a couple of men, only 2, and had 2 wounded. But he worries because they have 25 who can carry the bridge because 5 are wounded. Syl tells him that she saw Gaz and Lamaril and that she doesn't like the look of it, but she couldn't hear what they were saying. Kaladin starts thinking about using the bridge as a shield to protect from the arrows. And he tells some of the others about using a side carry. But it's very awkward to carry like that. Ask him why, and he doesn't want to reveal the shield theory, so he tells them it's so they can use different muscles. Osh asks why Kaladin gave him any position of power, and Kaladin tells him that it's because he's strong-willed and he was resistant to Kaladin's orders, and so he wants someone strong-willed. Gaz is upset about the side carry, but then he realizes that it might get Kaladin killed, and suggests that they should try it on a run. So then we get a flashback to Lyrin getting drunk 6 years before and telling Cal that he probably shouldn't come back to Hearthstone, their town, after he studies at Carbaranth. Cal wonders if the reason that people don't like Lyrin is because he looks under their skin as a profession. He's angry about the fact that Roshone told people to stop giving donations to their family, and they did. His father doesn't want to spend the spheres that Wistiau gave to Kaladin. They wanted to get Cal accepted for early admission to Carbaranth, but the surgeons refused. So Cal gets back to his studies. He pulls a rock out of his pocket and thinks of Tien. Tien had been learning carpentry because he couldn't stand the sight of surgery. He hates blood. Cal thinks about becoming a spearman again. Then there's a mob of villagers that like bangs on the door, demanding that Lyrin give them the spears that he stole. And Lyrin like yells at them, like telling him that he recognizes them, that he's treated their wounds, and like daring them to rob him, and they just kind of leave. Back in Bridge 4, a guy named Lopin joins. The Lopin, we love Lopin, and he has one arm. He and the shell-shocked guy, he's shell-shocked from the first battle that he saw. They carry water for the bridgemen. So Kaladin realizes that if they lose any more men, the bridge could topple over and crush the entire crew. So he orders the bridge to do the side carry. It works, and none of Bridge 4 gets killed, but because of what they did, most of the other bridges fell. The way that the way that the side carry worked, the Parshendi started targeting the other bridges instead, and then other bridges tried to do the side carry because they saw that it worked for Bridge 4, but they weren't trained in it, so they started dropping their bridges and they scattered, and all of the people that were holding the bridges died. So Sadius's forces are kind of undermined and they can't do the retreat. So Lamaril and Gaz show up, ready to execute Kaladin, and Kaladin tells them he'll need to be alive to convince Sadius that it wasn't their idea. So Kaladin gets beaten, and dun spheres, again, spheres without stormlight, are scattered from his belt. Then we go back to Shalon, which, listen, I like Shalon, but oh my god, her perspective is so boring in this. Studies, obviously, but she has to remind herself that her real goal is to steal Jasna's soulcaster because she really does love studying. She compares like what she thought Jasna was to who she actually is, and she worries that she might not be able to steal the soulcaster from Jasna because she won't be able to bring herself to do it. She wants to talk to Jasna about using soulcasters, but she just returns back to her task. When Shalon goes back to the alcove, she finds out that Jasna's not there, but Cabsul, the monk that wanted to convert Jasna, is there. He wanted to show something to Jasna, but he has bread and jam to share with Shalon. And then after discussing the meaning of the jam, like what it means for Shalon's personality, they talk a lot about Shalon personally, and then Jasna being a heretic. And Shalon kind of has a crush on Cabsul. Cabsul wants to show Jasna proof of the Almighty, which is basically that the four major cities of the four major cities of all the kingdoms, Kholinar, Vidanar, Thaylen City, and Akana, they all follow the exact path of sand in a bowl when a tuning fork is hit for it. Thinks that that's proof. Jasna is not surprised to see Cabsul, but isn't happy. She knows about the note thing, and she's not really impressed by it. And Jasna warns Shalon that Cabsul is only interested in her to get Jasna and her soulcaster. Then we go back to Kaladin's perspective, and this is one of my favorite chapters. Kaladin regains consciousness to find himself tied up by the ankles outside the barack. And Kaladin is to be judged by the Stormfather. He's going to be left out in the high storm to see if he'll survive, tied to a flagpole, which is impossible. Nobody has ever survived that, literally ever. Syl gets Rock, Teft, and Moshe, and they tell Kaladin about the disaster that happened with the side carry. They say that Bridge 4 will remember Kaladin and that they won't go back to how they were before. Kaladin is like lightheaded after being beaten and hung upside down, and he says, I want you to go back into the barack and tell the men to come out after the storm. Tell them to look up at me tied here. Tell them I'll open my eyes and look back at them, and they'll know that I survived. Which, ooh, chills, literal chills. And then they go back inside because the high storm is starting, and Syl tells him, like, you basically just told them that you're going to perform a miracle. And he's like, I kind of had to. And she's like, do you want to be a miracle? This is one of my favorite quotes. I cried the last time I read this. It says, Syl was silent for a moment. Do you want to be a miracle? No, Kaladin whispered, but for them I will be. Oh, I'm injured. I love this man. I'm in love with this man. I don't know if I want to be him or want to be with him, but like, just make him real, please. So he finally, Teft gives him a dun sphere that would be recharged by the storm, as like a lucky charm, and then they all go back inside. They all want to believe in him, but they don't really. And then the storm wall comes. It hits Kaladin and like flings him around. He gets beaten by like the sides of the barack and everything. He screams and like the water comes into his mouth. He like holds on tightly to the sphere, and Syl stays with him and tells him to grab the roof. So he kind of just tries to clutch on. He can kind of see Syl trying to act as like a shield from the storm for him. I love Syl too. I love all the characters. Anyways, he starts going numb. He sees like a vision of an enormous face and feels like a chill. The sphere is glowing, and then he falls unconscious. Then we get Teft's perspective. The high storm goes away. Rock and Teft leave the barracks, and they want to believe that Kaladin could survive the high storm, but they don't expect it. Then they find Kaladin, his body absolutely wrecked. His eyes snap open, just like he said they would. His eyes snap open. Everyone is shocked. Rock yells for them to get him down, and Teft sees Kaladin drop the sphere, which is done again. Which shouldn't be possible because the high storm was literally just there. But yeah, so... oh my god! Kaladin getting character development, yes! Shallan tries to steal Jasna's soulcaster while helping her with her bath, but she can't really do it. Then Jasna decides to teach Shallan philosophy, hands-on, by walking through a dangerous part of town at night, and when she's attacked by murderers, Jasna soulcasts one of them to fire. As they like try to run away, Jasna soulcasts another one to Crystal and uses lightning to kill the last two. Shallan decides that Jasna doesn't deserve to use a soulcaster and swaps it out with her broken one. And there's a quote from Jasna here, and it says, "Am I a monster or am I a hero? Did I just slaughter 4 men or did I stop 4 murderers from walking the streets? Does one deserve to have evil done to her by consequence of putting herself where evil can reach her? Did I have a right to defend myself, or was I just looking for an excuse to end lives?" So that's her lesson in philosophy. Then we get Kaladin's perspective from 5.5 years ago. Cal is trying to help his mother with cooking. Then Cal and Liren go to Roshon to meet. They argue about the spheres. Cal is treated like a servant by Roshon's son, and Laurel, who used to be his friend, kind of just lets him be treated like that. He gets taunted, and he decides that he wants to become a surgeon instead of a soldier. Like, he wants to follow his dad's footstep. And then Kaladin decides that he wants to go by the name of he wants to go by his full name, Kaladin, because it's a man's name instead of a boy's name. Then we're back in the present. Kaladin has a fever and he's like really beat up. He's mostly unconscious, and when he does, like, gain lucidness, he starts seeing Deathspren. And then Syl, like a little figure of pure white holding a sword made of light. And then she fights the Deathspren and wards them off so that they can't hurt him. He wants to die, honestly, because wouldn't you? But he fights because he doesn't want to fail Bridge 4 like he did everyone else. Then we get Teft's perspective. Teft tests a theory, a belief from the cult that he was in as a child. He puts 3 little spheres into Kaladin's hand and waits, and then Kaladin breathes in the stormlight, and it knits some of his wounds back together. Teft curses Kaladin because his past is really sad, and he had thought that it wasn't true what his cult had said, but now it proves that it was true. He knows that Kaladin can heal with the stormlight now, but he has to do it like a little bit at a time to conceal the fact that he's like magically healing Kaladin. Then we're back in Shallan's perspective. She is sitting in her room drawing the robbers from 3 nights ago, even though she didn't. So she has a photographic memory, so she can like take a memory, like a photo, and then draw it, and then once she draws it, the memory leaves her. She didn't deliberately take the memories of the men, but they're kind of imprinted in her mind. She starts thinking about different concepts of logic and philosophy, considering Jasna's actions. She tells her brother that she managed to steal the soulcaster but hasn't left yet so that she won't draw suspicion. Feels guilty about the theft, and she starts worrying about how safe it is. So she leaves the room with a basket of bread and jam that was left by Cabsol. She starts drawing some snails and plants to calm herself down. and she's like making notes about biology and stuff. She has no idea how to use the Soulcaster, and she's trying to figure out how to use it so she can save her family. We're back in Kaladin's perspective. His wounds are gone. He's fairly weak, but he's like mostly healed, and he leaves the barracks for the first time. Bridge 4 like are jumping all over themselves to see him, and they say that it's only been 10 days, and that's surprising because his wounds were like really severe. Then Kaladin helps on the bridge run, helping Lopin and David with water. He watches the battle and starts thinking about strategy, and realizes that the bridgemen are supposed to be bait, like they're not supposed to live. Bridge 4 gives Rock a razor as a gift for making stew, which is good because they're, you know, finally comrades, they're getting along. He shaves everybody. And Kaladin, he realizes that the bridgemen really do have no chance to survive, and he starts to worry that the wretch, which is what he calls himself when he's really depressed, is coming back. And oh boy, if I do not relate to the wretch. Then we're back 5.5 years ago. Roshon and his son are attacked by a white spine while hunting. Relir, the son, is fatally wounded. Lirin can't save him, so he turns his attention to Roshon, who is pissed and decides and like demands that he go back to helping his son. And Lirin refuses and explains like the guidelines of a surgeon with 2 patients. He says, if the wounds are equal, treat the youngest first. And Roshon is like, he's younger, treat him. If the wounds are not equally threatening, treat the worst wound first. And Roshon is like, his wound is worse, help him. And then he says, the third guideline supersedes the first 2. A surgeon must know when someone is beyond their ability to help. And he tells him that he can't save his son. So while he's stitching up Roshon, though, Lirin is like hesitating on whether or not he should kill Roshon, but he saves him instead. And Kaladin asks him why he didn't let Roshon die because it would solve all their problems. And Lirin says it would have been murder and that he's not a killer, and that even if Light Eyes don't care about life, someone has to start caring. Someone has to do what is right for the sake of it being right. That is. Kaladin realizes that if he had been in Lirin's place, he would have let him die. He decides that just as some body parts are beyond repair in a surgery, some people need to be removed. Shalon, we're back with Shalon, and she tells Jasna that she thinks that technically she was right to kill them, the men, but that she acted immorally and unethically. Jasna is happy that Shalon learned from the lesson and dismisses her. Shalon is confused at why Jasna hasn't reacted to the fact that her Soulcaster was stolen, and she wonders if it was a fake. She starts sketching and starts hearing voices, and then she goes into Jasna's room trying to find notes on soulcasting, but instead she finds a notebook focused on Natanatan and the Unclaimed Hills and the Shattered Plains, which are all different places that we haven't really heard of before this point. And then the other 2 contain notes on Urithiru, which is a mythical city, and then the Voidbringers. And Shalon wonders why a non-believer would concern herself with what she considers to be fairy tales. Then Cabsol comes in, who, having heard that she has free time, brought bread and jam for picnics. Shalon laments that she isn't much of a scholar since she prefers being outside, and Cabsol is flirting with her, and although she doesn't think that it would work out for them, she like encourages his flirting, and he implies that he might leave Ardentia for her. She brings the conversation back to Jasna, and he reveals that his initial plan was to get Shalon to help him steal the Soulcaster, but his supervisors didn't like that. They were afraid that Elhokar might start a war with Carburanth. So she asks about like how to use it, and he tells her how you're supposed to use it, but Jasna doesn't use it like that. So Capsule leaves, and she finds a note from the captain of the ship that brought her, and she wants to study as much as she can before leaving, so she goes back to read. Kaladin wakes up feeling like the wretch because the bridgemen are bait and they're destined to die. He finds the rest of the men lined up and waiting for him to lead practice. And before he can tell them how useless it is, though, he sees Lameral's replacement because Lameral was executed when the side bridge carry thing happened. They tell Kaladin that the Almighty has simply given Kaladin another chance to prove himself as a bridgeman. The man directs, or the wife of the man who replaced Lameral directs one of her men to beat Kaladin because he seems like high and mighty, but Kaladin like catches the spear. He can like imagine how he would beat the soldier and the 3 companions of the soldier, but he decides not to and lets himself get hit. The woman tells him that they'll only be doing chasm duty from now on. Syl is upset that he's not happy from surviving the high storm. And Kaladin is upset that he didn't get to fight the soldiers, but it wouldn't have helped protect Bridge 4. Syl vaguely remembers helping men kill, and she says that sometimes it is right to kill. They all climb down into the chasms and do the chasm thing. Teft argues that it's not about surviving, and that Kaladin being hopeless doesn't really matter. He quotes the Radiant Oath, Journey Before Destination. Syl likes that and encourages Kaladin not to give up, and he finally decides that he will keep trying because what else is he gonna do? Just die? Rock doesn't want to fight. So Kaladin offers to train them as spearmen. Everyone agrees except Rock because Rock doesn't fight. He says he'll cook instead. And then we have another backstory chapter. Oh my god, I've been talking for like 2 hours. This is gonna be such a long video. Yeah, so Kaladin, we're back in Kaladin's perspective 5 years ago. Kaladin is laying on the roof and he's kind of depressed. So Tienge like comes up and gives him a carved wooden horse that he made. Kaladin is worried because his father is spending money. Their mother joins them, trying to kind of calm his concerns, and they discuss him being a surgeon or being anything else, but Kaladin is kind of set on becoming a surgeon. Liren tells them that there's a gathering in the square, and when they get there, they notice that Laurel, Kaladin's friend, is engaged to Roshone, and Kaladin is appalled, but Liren tells him not to make a scene about it. Roshone announces that Amaram, the general, is here to recruit, and that and several people like volunteer. However, they still need more people, so Amaram tells Roshone to read a list of conscripts, and they were like, oh, well, that doesn't matter because Kaladin is a surgeon's apprentice, and a surgeon like is an important job, so he couldn't be drafted. But the last name that they read is Tien, Kaladin's brother. Amaram he knows what's happening with the situation, and he asks Roshone to provide a different name, but Roshone is like throwing a fit, and he says that he gets to choose who gets volunteered. Kaladin tries to volunteer to like take his place instead, but Roshone insists that Tien be conscripted, so Kaladin volunteers in order to protect him. But their parents are devastated because they just lost both of their sons, and Kaladin swears that he'll bring Tien back in 4 years when his conscription is up. Oh my god. Spoiler alert, that doesn't happen. Oh, it hurts my heart. Then we are back with Shallan. She is still studying, obviously. She notices that Gavilar was like uncharacteristically interested in the Parshendi. and she plans to leave for Jakaved, her homeland. She researches the Voidbringers, knowing that that's what Jasna is really interested in. And then Kabsal finds her. They discuss the Voidbringers a little bit, and she tells him that she plans to leave. He requests a drawing and pays her for it. And then he asks for one of her with him. And she draws, and she's been drawing like these creatures with symbol heads. And they're in every drawing that she makes, and she can't stop it. So she runs to her room, like being pursued by the creatures, which are still showing up in her sketches, even as she runs through the halls. She begins to summon her shard blade, which she has. Surprise! She has a shard blade? How? One of the creatures asks her what she is. She touches a glass, and she says, "I'm terrified," and it transports her to Shadesmar, which is a different world, essentially, and she soulcasts the goblet into blood without a soulcaster. So back in her room, Jasna calls for her. She's terrified that Jasna will discover that she soulcasted, and she cuts herself to explain the blood. Then we're back in Kaladin's perspective, and Kaladin is having a dream that he's riding the high storm as it like sweeps over Roshar. So Kaladin sees like a bunch of people and places that he's literally never seen before. He finally sees a man with shin eyes and a shard blade. It's Seth, just after he committed an assassination, and it feels like to Kaladin that the assassin could see him. So then a voice comes that like shakes the storm wall, and it tells Kaladin that the children of honor ride the storms no longer. And it tells him that Odium comes. And Kaladin asks why there's so much war, and the voice responds, "Odium reigns." Ominous. And then Kaladin wakes up, held down by a bunch of the bridgemen. He starts like fighting them off instinctually before realizing who they are. They had to hold him down to stop him from running out into the high storm. Then they all go outside to like bathe, and Kaladin accepts a shave from Rock finally. Rock reveals that one of the other men is, his name is Sigizil, that he is a world singer. And then they get assigned a new crew member, a Parshman, the Parshmen are like a version of Parshendi that can't think, and actually Parshendi means Parshman who can think. He doesn't give them a name, obviously, because he can't think, so they just call him Shen. Kaladin asks Syl about Odium, and she like zips off without saying anything. Kaladin sees an officer beating a prostitute on the street, and he starts to intervene, but he sees Adolin come and tell the officer to stop, and Adolin like escorts the prostitute out of camp. And then he gives Kaladin an emerald chip and tells him to pass along a message, but Kaladin refuses because he's not a messenger, and he feels like the Light Eyes was slighting him. But yeah, so he takes the chip, but he doesn't pass along a message. We're back in Kaladin's point of view a year ago, and Kaladin's enlistment is almost up, but he already wants to re-up because he can't face his parents because he failed to protect Tien. Tien is long dead at this point. Kaladin bribes a squad leader to transfer the new recruit Sen from the beginning of the book to transfer him to his squad. Kaladin wonders why the Alethi fight amongst themselves so much when they also join together to fight against real foreigners. He walks by the surgeons and bribes them so that his men will receive quick attention on the battlefield. And a windspren makes the pouch stick to his belt, making him stumble. That windspren was Syl. Spoiler alert, she's been with him the whole time. Anyways, so when he gets to the squad, Sen is already there. And Kaladin kind of scans the battlefield and talks to Dalit. Then he finds Sen in the battle and sees that he's like in the middle of the enemy soldiers, and he like dispatches 6 people all at once to protect Sen. Then the rest of his squad surrounds them while Kaladin bandages his leg. Kaladin decides to attack a Light-Eyed officer, and like quickly kills him. Then there's a shard bearer. The shard bearer kills Sen, tramples him, and kills others in his squad to get to Amaram. Kaladin and the rest of the men in his squad run after the shard bearer while everyone else is running away because Kaladin needs to avenge them. They fight really hard, but it's not working. And the shard bearer cuts down like sweeps of people, killing everyone but 4 of them. And just as he's like approaching Amaram, Kaladin aims for his eye, like the eye slit, and his spear is like cut, but he launches the spearhead and slams it into the eye slit, and it kills the shard bearer, which is legendary. Like, nobody has done this. Everyone who has killed a shard bearer as a regular Dark Eyes has been made into a legend, and they become Light Eyes and get land and everything. But all he can see when he looks at the blade is that it killed all of his men. And he refuses to take it because that would make him one of them, a Light Eyes. And so he tells one of his 4 remaining men that he can have it. Then we're back to Shalon's perspective. She's now on suicide watch in the hospital. She started growing accustomed to the creatures that kind of appear in her drawings. And she notes that she's like kind of in a prison, even though she's being like, she's being taken care of, but she's not able to leave. And she realizes that the suicide attempt is an easy excuse to go home. So she can go home now and learn how to use the Soulcaster. She finishes her sketch of the place that she went when she soulcast, and she figures that the symbol heads must have something to do with soulcasting. King Taravangian visits and agrees to let Shalon have visitors. Jasna tries to apologize, but she's not very good at it because she doesn't have much practice apologizing. And then she gifts Shalon a book of endless pages, which is just a book that doesn't have any writing in it, which the metaphor is that it has unlimited potential. So Capsule comes in with a basket of bread and jam. It's strawberry jam, which in this world, strawberries only exist in Shinovar, just like regular grass. Like, all the regular plants come from Shinovar. Jasna is curious about it and like smells it, but doesn't eat any. But she does eat the bread. Capsule insists that Shalon eats some of the jam, but it smells really, really bad. So Capsule like scoops up a big like glob of it and shoves it in his mouth, claiming it tastes good. He gets up and starts running, but he collapses. Shalon rushes to him, but she's also feeling dizzy. And Jasna shouts that she was poisoned, and that she needs a garnet. Shalon thinks that Jasna can't save her with the broken soulcaster that she has, so Shalon empties her safe pouch and reveals the stolen one, and then she feels a flash of heat through her insides before everything goes black. We are back to Kaladin. Kaladin and Bridge 4 are walking through the chasms. Kaladin thinks about where the water goes and wonders if it might be possible to escape to the east, which is kind of what he saw in his dream. Teft questions him about his health and asks whether he's feeling surges of strength or light. And Kaladin notes how fast he healed, and he wonders if he might have been cursed. He wonders if Syl isn't the only Spren who's following him, but maybe an evil one is as well. They find a crossroad, and Kaladin wants to use this for the training. He tells the bridgemen that normally in military training, sergeants will try to humble soldiers, but they don't need that. They just want to escape and survive. And his first real lesson is that a soldier should care and not be cold and emotionless. He drops the spear and tells them that the second lesson is to learn to stand before they learn how to fight, training how to stand. They send some of the men who won't fight or can't fight to collect the salvage so that they need to. And Syl helps them so that they like way quicker. So he teaches the bridgemen how to fight, and they're really good at it. Like, they learn in hours what should take them days, and he realizes that they've been prepared for training by the physical intensity of the bridge duty. Then we're back with Shalon. Shalon wakes up in the hospital, a different room this time, feeling really healthy. Shalon is having trouble remembering what happened, and then she sees a guard looking in on her and asks what happened. He doesn't answer, but she remembers kind of what happened. She asks if Capsule is all right, but the guard doesn't talk to her. When she tries to get up, he like glares at her, making her stay in bed. And she remembers that she returned the Soulcaster to Jasna. So Jasna comes in and demands to know who told her to steal her Soulcaster. And Shalon tells her that she stole it because she's trying to save her family. Jasna told her that Capsule was trying to poison her all along with the bread. The jam contained the antidote so that Shalon would survive. Jasna tells Shalon that she's really disappointed and that she understands that it was the guilt that drove Shalon to suicide, and that she's thrown away her career because no one will take her as a ward now if Jasna has anything to say about it. Then we are back in Kaladin's perspective. He's waiting in Amaram's waiting room. Only 4 of his men survived. He'd actually begun to think that he was lucky. He thinks he can be considered like a legend now, but he doesn't really care. Refusing the shards was like the stupidest thing he's ever done, but the thought of taking them like repulses him. Like he can't bear the thought of it. Amaram comes in and they're discussing the identity of the shard bearer, and the rest of Kaladin's squad enters and some light-eyed officers come in too. Amaram asks Kaladin why he rejected the shards, and he doesn't want to like reveal how much he hates Light Eyes, so he replies that he doesn't know why. Amaram signals to his soldiers and they kill the rest of Kaladin's squad, and he's like, Kaladin is held back by the guards, like screaming in agony. Amaram looks guilty, but he justifies his actions, saying that he's trained in the sword and Kaladin would demand the shards back in a few days anyways, but that since Kaladin saved his life, he'll spare his. He says that that a bunch of soldiers all telling the same story would be believed, but one man with a slave brand won't. So he gets branded a slave and the rest of his squad is killed. Yeah, it's very sad. Kaladin is such a tragic character, but I really, really love him. Yeah, then we have our interludes. None of these are important, except Seth kills the king of Jakaved, King Hanafanar. I don't really know how to pronounce some of these names. Like, I'm positive that Jasna is not how you're supposed to pronounce it because I've heard people say Yasna, but I absolutely refuse. Like, no. It's spelled with a J, I'm saying it with a J. Seth kills more people. He puts the shard blade through the king's face, which is kind of cool. Finally back to Adolin and Dalinar. Dalinar wants to abdicate to Adolin, but Adolin is not ready to be High Prince. And then a high storm comes and Adolin and Renarin tie Dalinar down. Dalinar goes into the vision and he notices an army of radiants, and he notices that something is wrong. So he runs out to approach the radiants, and then one of them sticks his shard blade into the ground, and then all of his pieces of shard blade fall off, and then he just walks away. And then all the other Night Radiants do the same. And Dalinar feels like loss and tragedy and tries to get them to tell him why they were doing this. And in the voice of the previous visions, like they say, they were the first and they were also the last. And he realizes that he's witnessing the Recreants, the day that the Night Radiants abandoned humanity. He comes back to himself and they resume their discussion about abdicating. Adolin wants Dalinar to just believe that his visions aren't true and ignore them, but Dalinar says that if he's going to lead, he has to trust his conscience, which includes the visions. Otherwise, he would lead their house to ruin. Renarin suggests that he might be able to verify whether Dalinar's visions are true or not. So Dalinar asks Navani to write it down for him, and then ask Jasna if she can prove any of the details. Then we are in we're in Kaladin's perspective, and Dunny is killed in a bridge run. To cope with that, Kaladin starts saving wounded men from other bridges. And his bridge 4 kind of hesitates at first because helping the other bridges will drain their resources, and he lectures them on honor and being hypocritical, and they start helping him. Teft reminds Kaladin to keep his pouch of spheres infused at all times, and comments on like the good luck that Bridge 4 had, how nobody died on their approaches. 4 of the wounded bridgemen survive. Then we're back with Dalinar. Elhokar hosts a feast. Wit sits next to Dalinar and tells him that Sadeas intends to reveal something at the feast. Then he leaves. Dalinar gathers like his guards around him just in case, and then goes to confront Sadeas. Sadeas announces that the strap was definitely cut, but it happened while the horse was in the king's palace, so that Dalinar is an unlikely suspect. After that, they discuss their friendship and how it's become estranged, and the war, and Dalinar admits to having called for retreat, but he says that he wants to find a way to win the war instead. So he proposes an alliance to Sadeas and sketches out some ideas for how they could complement each other, and Sadeas agrees. Back in Kaladin's perspective, Kaladin sees the first joint plateau assault with Dalinar and Sadeas, and it goes really well and really quickly, so Bridge 4 gets sent down to the chasms right after returning. They find an emerald brome, which is like a really high level of the currency, and a pouch of smaller spheres. So they kind of hatch a plan to take the pouch out of the chasms, but it would require someone to tie the pouch to an arrow and then shoot it like into a permanent bridge so that they can pick it up later. Rock finally admits that he can do it, and he nails it. But he says that he will never use a bow in battle. Then we're back in Dalinar's perspective. They attack another plateau together, Dalinar and Sadeas. But just when they think they've won, a second Parshendi army appears. Apparently as a direct result of them teaming up. Dalinar lays out a new strategy, but then sees that Sadeas is like right where the Parshendi have come. So Dalinar runs in with his horse, and he saves Sadeas. He defends Sadeas like single-handedly until Adolin is able to come help them. Sadeas asks why he would take such a huge risk for him, and Dalinar talks about the Way of Kings and the principles that are inside of it, and Sadeas is like that storming book. Like, he tells Dalinar that those ideals will kill him someday. We're back with Kaladin, and he loses a man. Teft is wounded, and Kaladin treats his arm. Teft prods Kaladin about odd experiences lately, and Teft goes to like punch Kaladin, and Kaladin breathes in Stormlight without even knowing it. Teft points out that all of his fears are done, and Lopin notices that Kaladin's pack is sticking to the side of a barrel. Kaladin is weirded out by this and kind of panicking, and he tries to get rid of the Stormlight and figure out what's wrong with him. And Syl finally admits that she's not actually a Windspren, that she doesn't remember much of her old life, but she knows that she binds things. And she says that Kaladin is changing because of her, that she takes something from him and gives something in return. Kaladin kind of wanders off, and he finds playing a flute. He tells him the story of Darethil and the Wandersail, so I'll explain what that story is a little bit. I'm pretty sure this is the right story. I didn't put this in the notes for some reason. But there was an explorer named Darethil on a boat called the Wandersail, And he came to an island where there was a huge set of steps leading up to a palace, and then inside the palace was a tower where the emperor was said to live. These people seemed really nice at first, the people on the island, but then he noticed that if anyone made the smallest mistake, they would descend on them like madmen, and they would kill them. So like a girl drops a glass of water, and she's immediately killed by all of the other people on the island. And when Darathil asks, "Why have you done this?" they say, "The emperor doesn't like imperfection." And so Darathil insists that he meet with the emperor, and they take him up to the tower and let him go into the emperor's room, where he finds nothing but a skeleton. And then he goes out and tells him that their emperor has been dead for a long time, and they immediately start killing themselves and throwing themselves off buildings. And so this is the story that Hoy told Kaladin. This is the story that Wit told Kaladin. And Kaladin is like, "What does the story mean?" And Wit is like, "It means whatever you decide it means." Kaladin concludes that the moral of the story is taking responsibility, and he decides that he has to take responsibility to save Bridge 4, even if that means embracing these powers that he has no idea what they are. Wit gives him a flute and tells him to take care of Sigizil, who used to be Wit's mentor. Kaladin goes back to the group and asks Teft how he knew what he is. And Teft says that when he was young, his family belonged to a cult that awaited the return of the Knights Radiant. He asks Teft how much he knows about his powers, and then they decide to try and find out more. So we're back in Adolin and Dalinar's perspective, and Adolin is just walking down the outer market of the war camp, and he notices that the other officers from the other armies are a lot less disciplined and more casual about the war, and he starts to agree with his father's version of honor. Dalinar recites a passage from the Way of Kings to Sadeas and Elhokar while they watch some duels and wait for Adolin's duel to begin. Sadeas dismisses the story and thinks it's boring and insults Dalinar, but Dalinar doesn't really care. Elhokar jokes that Sadeas could be the new Wit since he vanished, as he does sometimes. Adolin duels, and Dalinar says that if he were in charge, he would withdraw the army to stabilize their homeland and send envoys to the Parshendi to kind of investigate why Gavilar was killed. Elhokar talks about the people that are trying to kill him and inhuman faces that he sees in mirrors. Dalinar thinks that he's just paranoid. Elhokar finally gets Dalinar to agree to a joint assault with Sadeas, where both of their army's bridges are used, because Dalinar doesn't use people for bridge crews. He uses bigger, heavier bridges that Chols carry. He doesn't believe in having any man do something that he wouldn't do. So then we're back in Kaladin's perspective. They're in the barracks, and Kaladin tries to draw light from a sphere, but he doesn't really know how, and he wonders if he really is even a surge binder like Teft says he is. Teft lectures Kaladin. The woman who's now kind of in charge of Bridge 4 tells them that Bridge 4 will be on full-time bridge run duty during the day and chasm duty at night. And Kaladin kind of realizes that this is like a death sentence for his men. While they debate their options, Kaladin finally breathes in Stormlight, and he's glowing. I love it when he glows. I love it when people reveal that they have powers. That is my thing. I love that. Kaladin gathers them in the chasm, and they start practicing with spears again. Teft leads the drill, and Kaladin and Syl start investigating Parshendi corpses. He cuts off the carapace off of the Parshendi, and Lopin gathers some Parshendi bones. And then they tie the sack to the bottom of the bridge using Kaladin's Stormlight. And Kaladin just jumps off the rope that he was hanging on. and because Syl tells him he'll be all right. He falls 40 feet and lands perfectly fine. The reason that he gathered the Parshendi carapace and the bones is because the Parshendi really value their dead, and they insist on leaving their dead exactly where they lay. And if anyone disturbs the corpse of a Parshendi, they get really, really upset. Then we're back with Dalinar, and he decided not to abdicate to Adolin. They wait for the high storm, and Navani is there to record his high storm vision. He talks with a man in the vision who he realizes is the writer of the Way of Kings. He says that he would like peace, but to be human is to want that which we cannot have. And he walks off. Dalinar repeats this, and Navani asks him to repeat the last thing he said. And she tells him that she thinks that he's been speaking in the Dawn Chant, which is a dead language, and the phrase that he just said may be the key to translate the language. And that is the proof that they needed that the visions are real. After that, Adolin goes for a high storm damage report, and he's really shaken that the visions are real. Navani asks why Dalinar thinks that the man in his vision was Nohadin, the writer of the Way of Kings. He doesn't know exactly why he thinks that, but he just does. He knows that it's him. Navani tells him about what she knows about the Desolations, but insists that Jasna is the one who really knows what she's talking about. Then she tells Dalinar that the reason she really came back to the Shattered Plains is because she felt so useless, because she's expected not to get involved, to just be the king's widow. And they kiss. Cute. Old people romance. Adorable. And then she tells him that something is wrong on the planet, something bigger than the war that they're fighting. And then she tells him that the king of Jakaved was assassinated by a Shin Shardbearer wearing white, which is the description of the guy who killed the king. We're back in Kaladin's perspective. He and Bridge 4 are on another run, and he's nervous because he wants to try distracting the Parshendi with armor made out of the Parshendi armor and like a shield. On the way to the battlefield, a soldier tries to steal water from Bridge 4's water skin. And because Kaladin's armor is like hidden in there, Bridge 4 convinces him to go away. And then Kaladin takes out the armor, and he manages to draw the full attention of the Parshendi by wearing the Parshendi armor and shield. He uses Stormlight to be faster and like heal his wounds and draw arrows to his shield. Sadius rides up, and he promotes the guy that's like in charge of Bridge 4, even though his wife is really the one in Bridge 4 that's in charge of Bridge 4. And he's like forced to promote him because it actually worked. Like, it's distracting the Parshendi. Kaladin is kind of in shock after using so much Stormlight. The Bridge 4 members look for wounded people from the other bridges, and they start caring for them. And then they spot a group of Parshendi archers that are coming back to the chasm and still aiming at Bridge 4. Like, they're willing to die just to aim these arrows at Bridge 4. Then Kaladin tells Leighton, who used to be an armorer, to make that carapace armor for every member of Bridge 4 except for Shen, because he doesn't want to wear it. Kaladin observes the spear practice and notices that Moshe is really, really skilled. Moshe says that he wants vengeance, but doesn't say who he wants vengeance on. Moshe is really sad. Kaladin and Rock are talking about escaping. Teft asks Kaladin to teach the bridgemen spear fighting, but he says that he would become like too impatient, and Kaladin finally admits that he's failed in the past and that it got to him, and that he's tired of people he's trying to save dying. We're back in Dalinar's perspective. Dalinar and Navani are still seeing each other. He deferred to Gavilar when his brother showed interest in her, because he was the older sibling and he was going to be king. And they revealed that they've always kind of been in love with each other. Their conversation is interrupted by alarms indicating the chasm fiends, and it's on the right plateau for Dalinar and Sadeas to run their dual assault. Bridge 4 lines up for this assault, and they're all wearing the carapace armor. They also all have shields crafted from Parshendi bones. The other bridgemen are kind of like in awe of this. Adolin is shocked that he was wrong about his father, but he's glad that that now they know that the visions are real and he can trust him. They decide to all bring as many troops as they can to try and finish the Parshendi off all at once. Everybody's perspectives are kind of blending now because it's the Sanderlanche. This is the best part of the book. I love the climaxes of his books. So Dalinar and Sadeas watch a really big army of Parshendi line up, and they're still trying to remove the gem heart. Sadeas suggests they attack together, but Dalinar knows that the bridgemen will be killed. But Sadeas tells him about their master plan with the Parshendi bones and that nobody's been killed. Kaladin leads the bridge crew in, though he draws more arrows than anybody else. But all the bridges are in place and the army rushes across. Kaladin helps people who were hit by arrows, including Teft. Dalinar orders a crew to set up a bridge for his army to cross, and he leads his men into battle. And then Sadeas retreats. He takes his whole army and leaves, including his own bridge crews, which traps Dalinar on the plateau. Sadeas betrayed him! Kaladin notices that Sadeas is retreating even though the battle is going well, and then finally realizes that he's betraying Dalinar, seeing that Sadeas is unharmed, and he hears him say that Dalinar's honor was always going to get him killed. Adolin yells at Dalinar because he knew that Sadeas was going to betray them, and Dalinar finally agrees. Adolin won't refuse, Adolin doesn't want to blame his father though, saying that his honor would not make him behave differently, which surprises Dalinar because he didn't think that his son believed in him like that. And Dalinar motivates his soldiers by saying, "Death is the end of all men," Dalinar bellowed. "What is the measure of him once he is gone? The wealth he accumulated and left for his heirs to squabble over, the glory he obtained only to be passed on to those who slew him, the lofty positions he held through happenstance? No, we fight here because we understand. The end is the same. It is the path that separates men. When we taste that end, we will do so with our heads held high, eyes to the sun." Inspiring, truly. Dalinar is so inspiring, Kaladin is so relatable, and Shallan is so entertaining. I just love all their characters. But yeah, anyways, I'm still rambling. Oh my god, it has been 3 hours that I've been talking about this this one book, for 3.5 hours. But yeah, I love this book series so much. It's really so good. Anyways, that's all for me. Hold on, we're almost done explaining the plot. So Bridge 4 kind of lags behind and they're wounded, so they're kind of not able to get ahead of the army. Kaladin kind of makes a plan so that they'll kind of fall back slowly. Kaladin he's a little unsettled by the fact that there are still wounded people back at camp. He's unsettled, but not just because of the men that he would leave behind. He sees Syl as a regular sized woman next to him, and she's looking back at the battle with horror. Kaladin looks back and sees all of those soldiers who are dark eyes just like him, surrounded hopelessly, and Syl says that she remembers what kind of spren she is. She's an honor spren, the spirit of oaths, promises, and nobility. Kaladin is trying to save Dalinar would be suicide. And his men owe Dalinar nothing. He doesn't want to be fooled again like when he saved Amaram. But finally, he remembers what his father said to him. The Light Eyes don't care about life, so I must. We must. And then the ideals of the Radiants form in his head. Strength before weakness, life before death, journey before destination. I think that's the right order. Yeah. So, and he tells Bridge 4 that they have to go back. So they do. They lift the bridge and they head back to save Dalinar. Dalinar is losing the battle, and they kind of just push towards the bridge crew when they see him. Dalinar thinks that Kaladin is committing suicide, but he's glad that he'll die alongside him. And then Kaladin dodges all the arrows, and they side carry the bridge, and he uses a huge amount of stormlight to draw all the arrows to his shield. The Parshendi call him Neshua Kadal, and they run. He's really drained, but they prepare to fight. Kaladin lays on the ground, and he feels like he's failed to protect again, just like the day that Tien died. Flashback, Kaladin's squad is all dead, and now he has to go back to the reserves for reassignment. He tries to find Tien's squad, but when he finally finds Tien's squad, he sees that they've been put in the front line of the battle, and Tien is killed. Tien is killed right in front of him. He couldn't save him. My heart. Syl tells Kaladin that he has to say the words, and then he says them because he just knows them, even though he's never heard them before. And it's the second ideal of the Knights Radiant. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. I love it. I love it. Oh my god, the description. You don't understand the descriptions of this. Like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Literally so good. Teft sees Kaladin explode with energy and light, and they watch as Kaladin, like, bursts into light. And it says, strangers, oddities in carapace breastplates and skull caps, many of them wearing beards woven with glowing gemstones. Kaladin breathed in. Like the power of salvation itself, like rays of sunlight from the eyes of the Almighty, stormlight exploded from those gemstones. It streamed through the air, pulling invisible streams like glowing columns of luminescent smoke, twisting and turning and spiraling like tiny funnel clouds until they slammed into him, and the storm came to life again. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh. This is the purpose of my channel. It's just for me to geek out about books. Like, okay. Yeah, so Adeline is cutting through the Parshendi to try and get to the bridge. Teft and Bridge 4 are like transfixed watching Kaladin fight the Parshendi because he's like inhumanly fast and precise, and he glows, and they all kind of gawk at him. But then Teft commands them to defend the bridge's position. Dalinar fights his way to the bridgemen. He thinks that they've died by now, but he like thanks them for giving him purpose as they fight. But then he sees that the bridgemen are holding their ground, and he orders Adeline to support them. And then he turns his attention to getting all of his men across. But then a 7-foot-tall Parshendi steps out in shard plate. It was the shard bearer from before. Dalinar is surprised at this, but thinks that he's there to prevent Dalinar's retreat. Dalinar's shard plate is really damaged right now, but he is able to like lure the shard bearer up onto a rock formation, and then he cuts the rock out, and it like makes the shard bearer fall over into the chasm. The shard bearer isn't dead, even after he cuts another piece of rock onto the shard bearer, but Dalinar is too slow from his shard plate being damaged to take advantage of the fact that the shard bearer is like toppled. Kaladin and Bridge 4 keep fighting, and Kaladin he finds that he really respects the Parshendi. He seems to find honor in the Parshendi that he was looking for in the Alethi war camps. Finally, the Kholin army breaks through and they get to the bridge, and Kaladin stops to take a report from his men, and he finds out that 4 of them died. He orders everyone back across the bridge, and Kaladin takes control of the retreat. He promotes a light-eyed officer. Like, he's just like, you're promoted now, you're in charge. And they're like, who are you? And he's like, I'm the one who's saving your ass. Get over here. But yeah, so Kaladin finds Adolin and is like, cross that bridge. And Adolin's like, I'm not gonna cross the bridge with my father out there. And Kaladin is like, I will find him and protect him. Now go. And so he does, because Kaladin is just like so convincing. Dalinar is still getting attacked by Parshendi. And the Parshendi says, it is you. I found you at last. Then Dalinar sees Kaladin, who is glowing, approaching. Kaladin uses his Stormlight strength to finally save Dalinar. And the Parshendi, they're still chanting Neshua Kadal and backing away, not attacking him. He finds Dalinar's horse and brings it to him, and then he forces Dalinar to leave because Dalinar wants to finish off the other Shardbearer, but Kaladin is like, I call upon your honor to make you retreat because nobody will leave without him. So he agrees and they leave. And then we are in Navani's perspective, where she writes a prayer for Dalinar on the ground of Sadio's war camp because he returned without Dalinar, and then she burns it. Then Dalinar arrives and he goes to confront Sadeas. He knows he has to protect the unity of Alethkar despite the fact that he's so angry. He offers to send Kaladin's bridgemen with the people going to his war camp, but they are determined to like see his promise through that he will buy their freedom. He's not willing to force them to leave, so he lets them come with him to Sadeas' war camp. He finds Renarin and Navani there and gives them a hug, and he tells Navani that he sees the world differently and is unwilling to let lying men control his life, so he like embraces her in public. He confronts Sadeas, and Sadeas apologizes for overestimating the threat against Dalinar's forces and retreating too soon. He asks Sadeas why, really, and Sadeas responds that he made an oath to protect Elhokar, and he said that Dalinar is going insane. And in the end, he just wanted Dalinar gone. Dalinar realizes that honor would never win Sadeas' loyalty. Sadeas isn't an honorable man. Sadeas says that their alliance was unfeasible, and Dalinar claims the bridgemen, but Sadeas doesn't want to let them go. He offers 60 emerald bromes each for the bridgemen, which is an insane amount of money. That's like millions of dollars. But Sadeas is not willing to sell the slaves because he really wants to execute them. Kaladin turns away because Dalinar won't be able to buy them. And then Kaladin sees that Dalinar offered his shard blade for all of Sadeas' bridgemen. Sadeas accepts because shard blades are like priceless. And Kaladin is like in shock over this, and Kaladin asks Dalinar why. He asks why, and it says, "What is a man's life worth?" Dalinar asks softly. The slave masters say one is worth about 2 emerald bromes, Kaladin said, frowning. And what do you say? A life is priceless, he said immediately, quoting his father. Dalinar smiled, wrinkle lines extending from the corners of his eyes. Coincidentally, that is the exact value of a shard blade. So you and your men sacrificed to buy me 2,600 priceless lives, and all I had to repay you with was a single priceless sword. I call that a bargain. And Kaladin realizes that Dalinar actually believes that. And he can't help but think that maybe Dalinar is an honorable man. Yeah, so... Dalinar goes to find Elhokar and attacks him immediately, cracking his shard plate and keeping him from summoning his blade. He kicks Elhokar's breastplate in. This is really sudden, but that's like, it's supposed to be jarring. And then he demands to know if Elhokar cut his own saddle to get Dalinar to take his assassination claims more seriously. And Elhokar admits that he did do that. And Dalinar explains the consequences that happened because of this. And he says that he could have easily killed Elhokar 100 times over already, and that he doesn't want to. He's not his enemy. He tells Elhokar that tomorrow he will appoint Dalinar as High Prince of War, because he needs to see Alethkar united again. He's decided to stop being a peacemaker and return to being the Blackthorn, who he used to be. Elhokar is reluctant, but Dalinar just leaves, knowing that he's going to. He also tells Elhokar, "Your mother and I are dating." So then we're back with Shallan. She is sad about Kabsul's death, but she realizes that not everything quite adds up. She wonders why the antidote didn't work for Kabsul and why Jasnah wasn't poisoned since she'd eaten the bread. And then she finds her sketchpad and draws a drawing of Jasnah examining the strawberry jam, remembering that it wasn't smelling bad when she tasted it. Then she draws Jasnah eating the bread, and it looks like it's melting in her drawing. And then she realizes that Jasnah's soulcaster is fake, and that she was soulcasting without the soulcaster. She shows her the picture that she'd drawn of Shadesmar. Jasnah tells her that she's hallucinating. To prove it, Shallan tries to return to Shadesmar, and she speaks with the symbol-headed Spren that she sees, and they request a truth, preferably a secret truth, to form a bond. And to form it, Shallan admits that she killed her father. That's why her father is dead, because she killed him. She falls into the Sea of Beads in Shadesmar, and Jasnah rescues her and reprimands her for going into Shadesmar with only a single dull sphere. Shallan asks to be part of Jasnah's work, and she says that she could be someone that can share Jasnah's secrets. And Jasnah finally says, "Promise never to lie or steal from me again, and I will do it." And she gives Shallan her notes on the Voidbringers. Then we get Seth's point of view. He is going to Carboranth to assassinate King Taravangian. And then he gets inside King Taravangian's room, and Taravangian pulls out his oath stone, because Taravangian is his true master. And he tells Seth that he had put his name last on the list, so that if the list ever got found out, that he wouldn't be suspected. Seth accuses him of using Seth to do his dirty work, and King Taravangian takes him to a secret hospital that's filled with dying people having their blood drained out of their bodies. The king is showing Seth that people have death rattles when they die, and so he's trying to collect death rattles as prophecies. So he explains that he is not, his hands are not clean, but he thinks it's important, and he thinks that their words may contain the key to salvation. And then he adds a name to his list of people to kill that he had hoped wouldn't be necessary, which is Dalinar Kholin. Before reading Jasnah's notes on Voidbringers, she starts asking Jasnah questions about soulcasting, and then Jasnah turns the conversation back to Voidbringers, and Jasnah tells her that she believes that something real caused the legend of Voidbringers. Even though she doesn't believe in the religion, she believes that something inspired the Voidbringers. And then, reading from her notes, Jasnah tells Shalon that the humans on Roshar did not destroy or banish the Voidbringers. They enslaved them. And then it describes the Voidbringers as having black and white and red marbled skin, like the Parshmen. The Parshmen are the Voidbringers. Then we cut to Kaladin, who is waiting in Dalinar's war camp. And Dalinar asks Kaladin and Bridge 4 to become his new honor guard that had been wiped out earlier in the day. And Kaladin agrees that on the condition that the men agree and that Dalinar makes him a captain, which is the highest rank he could give Kaladin without people like revolting. And then Dalinar gives Kaladin his cloak that he wore to the battle as a token of his appreciation. They do their nightly tradition of eating rock stew, and then they start experimenting with his abilities. But he makes them promise that they won't tell anyone that he has these magical powers, and he can finally relax knowing that he succeeded in saving someone. It's 5:30 in the morning, so maybe I'm just a little bit tired, but oh my god, I'm gonna cry. He finally saved someone. I love Kaladin so much, and it brings me joy when he's happy. Anyways, Shalon agrees that the Parshmen are Voidbringers, and they discuss how like embedded Parshmen are in their society because they're such like cheap and easy slaves to use. They decide to travel to the Shattered Plains to continue their investigation. And then they discuss the Ghostbloods, a secret organization that is also seeking answers about Voidbringers. And Jasna tells Shalon that Kabsal was a member of the Ghostbloods. And after seeing their symbol, Shalon realizes that it's the same symbol that her brothers had showed her, and that her father was probably a member as well. Then we are in Dalinar's perspective. During the High Storm, after Sadius's betrayal, he finds himself on a like white rocky landscape with smoky figures around him, and the voice says again to unite them. And Dalinar asks why the voice lied to him about trusting Sadius, but instead of answering, the voice kind of appears as a human and continues telling Dalinar to prepare for the Everstorm. The Everstorm, showing him a wall of darkness and Kholinar in ruins. Dalinar keeps asking questions and demanding answers, but then he realizes that the voice can't hear him, and it never could. The voice keeps telling Dalinar that this vision is only a glimpse into the future born of his fears. And the ground falls away as the wall of darkness passes by, until only like the space where Dalinar stands remains. And the voice tells Dalinar that someone must lead, unite, and protect the people. And he tells Dalinar to rebuild the Knights Radiant, explaining that unity is the key to facing the true desolation. And then the very end is the voice proclaims that he was God, the Almighty. I am dead now. Odium has killed me. Oh! God is dead? What? Ominous. And then that's the end of the book, and then there's an epilogue. And it's Wit having a conversation with guardsmen in Kholinar, and he asks what is the talent that men value most. And they suggest things, but Wit replies that they're not. And he says that they're wrong about what it is. He says, what is it we value? Innovation, originality, novelty, but most importantly, timeliness. I fear you may be too late, my confused, unfortunate friend. And then Talon, the final herald, stumbles out. And that is the end of The Way of Kings. Have I been up for 3.5 hours talking about this book? Yes, I have. It is 5:30 in the morning. However, we are going to finish this book review. So yeah, that book is a 6 out of 5 stars for me. I love it. The emotional response that I have to this book is just Like, that's what makes me love a book, is if it can make me feel things. And this book makes me feel everything. I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel excited, I feel like I know something. Like, it's so good. So, so who should read this book, basically, is the question that I wanted to ask here. And the answer is, I think everybody should read this book. But truly, if you are a fan of epic fantasy, if you like reading about all these different topics that I've discussed, if you like really intricate plots and world building, and you like really realistic characters, I think this is a great book for you. If you don't like long books and you are a very impatient person, then I wouldn't suggest it, just because it does take a long time to really get into. But if you have patience and you can sit through it, I really love it. And I don't know if you should start with this book series in the Cosmere, because there are so many books in the Cosmere. I did personally start with the Stormlight Archives, and I haven't read any of the other ones, and I love it so much, even on its own. I actually once saw a meme that said, if your first book in the Cosmere was the Stormlight Archives, then you're looking for a book that doubles as a melee weapon. Like, like you looked for the thickest book in the room and then picked it out. And the truth is, that is exactly how I found it, actually. I was looking for the biggest book in my middle school library. And I found The Way of Kings, and I'd seen other people reading it before, so I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And it has consumed my entire life now. So be ready for that. I have a Bridge 4 tattoo on my ankle. I'm not going to show it because it's unfinished, because I do my own tattoos and my arms have been broken, so I haven't had a chance to finish it, but I literally have a Bridge 4 tattoo, so. Editing wickedly here. I did not plan to film today. It is currently 2 in the morning, the night after I stayed up explaining this book, but I realized that I didn't actually talk about anything that I liked within the plot. I just kind of explained the plot and then did not add any extra commentary. So I have now watched that entire video that I just made through, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I actually liked about The Way of Kings. So the first thing that I really like, other than just the world building, is the political world building specifically. Like how intricate the political system is and how much they all interact with each other, and the scheming that goes on, and like the thoughts in their heads on how they're trying to manipulate each other is just really, really interesting, especially as it gets more complicated as the book goes on. I really, really like, it has the trope that I really love, that I talked about this before, which is characters revealing that they have magic is so cool to me. Like, every time I see it, I start freaking out. Like I said, I'm autistic, so I will like go crazy stimming, especially in this book series. Like, this book series had me stimming so much, I was concerned about my muscles because my arms were just like flapping everywhere, and I've been trying not to like clap or anything with my hands because they've been broken, so it's been really difficult for me to edit this while I am manually impaired. But yeah, so I love that trope of characters revealing that they have magic. So Kaladin is amazing, and then the next book, when Dalinar finds out, quick spoiler alert, I freak out. I freak out every time, okay? I do it when Castiel reveals he has magic as an angel in Supernatural. I do it every time someone in Merlin finds out that Merlin has magic, like... Oh, I love it so much. I really love all the themes that it dives into in the books, like the themes of honor and responsibility, and, you know, trust in yourself, and just the way that it handles grief and depression is really special to me. I really like how Brandon Sanderson writes his climaxes, because I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, the Sanderlanche doesn't exist, that's just a climax, that's what happens in a climax. And the truth is, yes, but Brandon Sanderson just does it better. Like, I don't know. It's just everything comes together so well. Like, it all ties up nice and neat, and you feel so satisfied. Like, he's fed you with this, like, 5-course meal of just everything coming together so nicely. And I really love it. I love watching the plots wrap up in real time. And even, especially in the 5th book, like, oh, did I cry? Yes. But also, it was incredible. And I really love how he handles everything, like, so nuanced in his perspectives. Yeah, and then I really do love this book series, but yeah. So I just wanted to say, you know, I wanted to point out some of the things that I actually like that it tackles, aside from what I mentioned in the beginning, because I realized that I didn't mention them at all. So yeah, ignore me being a mess. I was not supposed to be on camera today, but anyways. That is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I love this book. I've read it so many times. I really think people should get into it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad somebody requested this because I literally did talk about this book for hours on end. And I've been waiting to talk to somebody about it. So if you've read The Way of Kings and you love it or you hate it or literally anything, like if you've read The Way of Kings, please leave it in the comments and let me know so that I can just rant about this book forever because I really love it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye.